Chapter 23. As the heat spread through his body, the sliver of chi became active as well. It flowed through his wounds and gave him a slightly itchy feeling. Huang Binghu released a few agile hunters as scouts. The group of people hurried into the depths of the mountains around the ox cart. They walked all the way until the sky darkened. They entered a large mountain, and there was no sign of human activity in the surroundings. At the foot of the mountain, Li Qingshan saw the legendary Drawn Reins village. Tall wooden walls surrounded the village, and there were watchtowers in the four corners. It did not seem like a village, but more like a military camp. He approached it and passed on the message. Just now, the gate opened. It was not as casual as it had been in Crouching Ox Village. As the only outsider, Li Qingshan attracted everyone's attention. He did not show it on the surface, but he became nervous inside. This was the legendary dragon's den that could make an army rein in their horses. Although Huang Binghu did not seem to have any ill intentions, he still needed to deal with him carefully, just in case he lost his life carelessly. The thick steel blade had already been taken away. Even if it was still there, it had been damaged to the point where it could no longer be used after the battle. Huang Binghu arranged for him to stay in an empty courtyard. Although he did not send anyone to watch over him, he told him not to wander around. Afterwards, he left in a hurry. In the pavilion at the very center of the village, the most prestigious hunters of the Drawn Reins village were currently discussing around a round table under the illumination of a few lanterns. For the sake of gathering ginseng, the Ginseng King village has had grievances with us for a very long time. People from the village often die mysteriously in the mountains, so it's probably their doing. They even set their sights on the spiritual ginseng this time, so it's a perfect opportunity to give them a stab in the back. The two villages were only a few mountains away from each other. There was no clear boundary between them. The ginseng foragers made a living by gathering ginseng, while the hunters spent most of their time in the mountains, so they could still recognize ginseng. They obviously would not let it go if they came across it. As a result, many disputes arose. The disputes between the villagers would often be settled with knives. Because they were far enough apart, large-scale fights had never happened. Until a while ago, on the Bailaro Peak, which was closer to the Drawn Reins village, between the two villages, they once again met on a narrow path. They discovered a legendary spirit ginseng that already had the shape of a human and could even leave the ground and walk. Such a rare treasure caused another massacre. After the massacre, the spiritual ginseng had already disappeared without a trace, but it should still be on Bailaro Peak. The men from the two villages did not dare to act blindly without thinking. They searched the mountain on a large scale, but they were also making preparations. Hunting chief, this matter must not be leaked out. It's better to deal with that brat. That brat's skills aren't bad, and his temper is also to my liking. It would be a pity to kill him. I want him to stay in the village and contribute to the village. But he is still an outsider. There's no need to say any more. I will examine him carefully. If he doesn't have the qualifications, I will definitely not be lenient. Huang Binghu said resolutely. Then, he coughed. In the pitch-black hut, Little An crawled out from the locust wood tablet and looked at Li Qingshan with concern. He reached out his hand and touched the scabs on his body. Li Qingshan said, "Don't worry, I'm fine. I'm fine for now." Although he could tell that Huang Binghu appreciated him, the feeling of having his life in someone else's hands was really uncomfortable. And if he wanted to control his fate in his own hands, he could only become stronger. He immediately followed Oxen's instructions and used the ginseng wine to soak the medicinal wine. Just now, he stopped and looked at his results, feeling a wave of joy and gratification. The next morning, Li Qingshan woke up early to practice Ox Demon's Fist of Great Strength. Suddenly, he felt a gust of wind behind him, as if a fierce tiger was pouncing at him. Li Qingshan turned around and punched, but it landed on empty air. Huang Binghu brushed past his arm, his right hand forming a claw and grabbing at his throat. He wants to kill me to silence me? A thought flashed through Li Qingshan's mind. Instead of dodging, he met the attack head-on, as if he was delivering his vitals into someone else's hands. At the same time, he drew his arms together like an old bear hugging a tree, exerting all the strength in his body. He cultivated in strength remarkable abilities, not mortal martial arts. Even though he had not cultivated the strength of an ox, the strength of a single hug was not something that flesh and blood could withstand. Huang Binghu suddenly retracted his claw, shrinking his body and circling behind him. Not good, Li Qingshan said. Just as he was about to adjust his body, he felt that Huang Binghu had stopped attacking and was only looking at him approvingly. If he had retreated from that claw attack just now, the full power of that attack would have easily torn his throat apart. But instead of retreating, he advanced, restraining the power of that move. At the same time, he used a move that put his life on the line. Not only was he able to adapt to the situation, he was also quite courageous. I've lost. Li Qingshan touched his neck. There were 5 bloody marks on it. Huang Binghu's skills were quite impressive. Even if he was not injured, he was definitely not his match. Where did you learn your martial arts? Huang Binghu asked. Other than being courageous and adaptable, Li Qingshan's martial arts were also very unusual. Even if a normal person's reaction was fast enough, they would not be able to catch their breath. Furthermore, when his 5 fingers had touched Li Qingshan's neck, it felt as if he had pierced the tough hide of an ox instead of a soft vital point. Li Qingshan naturally could not say that he had been taught by an ox, or else he would be treated as an idiot. He could only say that he had met an expert a few years ago. Seeing that he had a simple and honest personality, the expert had taught him a few moves, but had instructed him not to reveal his identity. A few years ago, Huang Binghu was flabbergasted. He was not too surprised that Li Qingshan was not willing to reveal his master. However, he had originally thought that Li Qingshan had practiced martial arts since he was young. If he wanted him to stay in Drawn Rain's village, the most important thing was to ask him about his master. What's wrong? Li Qingshan did not understand. Haven't you been practicing martial arts since you were young? In just a few years, he was able to teach you to such an extent. It is truly inconceivable. It seems like that expert is truly an expert. Li Qingshan sweated in his heart. Luckily, he had casually said it was a few years ago and not a month ago. Otherwise, Huang Binghu would definitely be scared to death. At the same time, he also understood that mystical abilities and mortal martial arts were on 2 completely different levels. He was currently not Huang Binghu's match because he had practiced for less than 2 months, while Huang Binghu had spent 20 to 30 years of hard work. May I know why the hunting chief has come this time? Brat, do you have any intentions of settling down in Drawn Rain's village? Although it was a question, it had a tone that could not be refused. All right. Li Qingshan readily agreed, but it was Huang Binghu who was stunned. You don't have any nostalgia for your hometown? If I don't agree, would the hunting chief let me leave safely? Li Qingshan said calmly. Furthermore, I once heard a saying. What saying? Wherever I go is my hometown. Whether it's Crouching Ox Village or Drawn Rain's village, they're no different from me. Perhaps I can learn some archery here. Do you understand, hunting chief? My ambitions do not lie in these mountains and forests. With your mediocre martial arts, making a living in the Jianghu is just a path to death. Otherwise, you'll just be a small fry that serves as a stepping stone for the disciples of large sects and clans. How can it compare to the freedom in the mountains and forests? Is hunting chief's skill not enough? Li Qingshan was rather surprised. Huang Binghu's reputation in the surrounding villages could be described as illustrious. I'm not afraid of you laughing at me. My archery is passable, and I've made a name for myself in the past. However, there are countless masters in the Jianghu. You've been practicing martial arts for several decades, but a child in his teens killed you like a dog. I suffered greatly. It's already fortunate that I managed to return alive. Chapter 24. Huang Binghu felt that he had not shocked Ting Qingshan enough, so he continued, Your blade techniques and fist techniques are wide and open, so you should be walking on the path of external martial arts. This type of martial arts can be learned quickly, but if you don't have the assistance of a superior internal martial art, from the outside to the inside, reaching the realm of both internal and external cultivation, it will be difficult for you to become a first-rate master, let alone an innate master. First-rate master? Then what kind of class am I? And what is an innate master? Li Qingshan's string of questions made Huang Binghu somewhat believe in the words of an expert. If he had a proper master, how could he not know these things? Qingshan, your skills are not third-rate. That's why I don't qualify. You were able to defeat those ginseng foragers, so you can already be considered an expert. You are still young, so don't be too discouraged. As long as you train hard and become a third-rate master, you will be able to do as you please. With your talent, Qingshan, this will definitely not be a problem. Huang Binghu was afraid that the blow was too severe and would dampen Qingshan's spirit, so he comforted him out of goodwill. However, who would have thought that the goal that Oxen had given to Li Qingshan was to do as he pleased, and the so-called internal martial art was even more of a joke. An innate master is even more mysterious. First, you must open up all the meridians in your body, break through the threshold of life and death, and transform your inner energy into true qi. Then, you can circulate it freely in your body without any obstructions. Once your true qi reaches a certain level, you can even release it outside your body to injure others. Wait, it seems like the qi in my body can circulate freely now, but I can't release it outside my body. It must be because the amount is too small. Li Qingshan suddenly understood that from the beginning, he stood on a different starting line than ordinary people. The path he walked on was unimaginable to ordinary martial artists. Hunting chief, I will definitely become an innate master. Huang Binghu praised him, good ambition, but his expression was non-committal. An innate master? When he first heard about these things, didn't he also have this kind of ambition? But how could it be so easy? It was as if he saw himself from back then. If you really become an innate master, I will let you be the hunting chief. This was not a casual promise. In his mind, even if Li Qingshan could become a Xiantian master, it would be decades later. Who would have thought that the person in front of him was already a so-called Xiantian master? Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. Hunting chief, you don't seem to be in good health. I was born weak. The doctor said that I wouldn't survive, but my mother didn't believe him and brought me up. I don't believe that I can't be compared to the other children in the village. I've practiced martial arts, but my foundation is still weak. I've been hurt all these years, and I'm afraid I don't have much longer to live. Li Qingshan really admired the man in front of him. Even though he didn't have any great magical powers, his willpower was enough to be his role model. Hunting chief, don't worry. As long as we find the spirit ginseng, we will definitely be able to cure you. Although it's an ethereal object, it's still a slim chance of survival. Taking advantage of the fact that the Ginseng King Manor has suffered heavy losses, we're going to start searching the mountain today. Do you want to come along? My injuries haven't healed yet, so I'm afraid I won't be able to help you. Of course, Li Qingshan wouldn't agree. The other party was just saying it casually. There was no way he would really believe him. Alright, then we'll spar again when your injuries have healed. I'll arrange for someone to teach you archery. Huang Binghu patted his shoulder. After Huang Binghu left, Li Qingshan immediately asked Oxen about it. Oxen said disdainfully, what first-rate or second-rate? Do ants have to differentiate between strong and weak? If you can get that spirit ginseng, it'll be of great help to your cultivation. Li Qingshan could only stare at it anxiously. I'm very happy that you can learn to hunt and no longer have to rely on me. You can finally rest. From now on, you'd better take care of yourself. As expected, Oxen stuck to its usual plan of not lending a helping hand. Li Qingshan also didn't really plan on relying on it. As for snatching food from the tiger's mouth between two villages, he had even less confidence. He would most likely be throwing his life away for nothing. He could only sigh a few times and give up on this idea. He chewed on another ginseng and meditated until late at night. Just now, he was going to sleep. A wisp of green smoke rose from the locust wood tablet and transformed into a handsome child. He glanced at Li Qingshan and, as if he'd made up his mind, flew into the mountain with the night wind. His bloodless lips opened and closed. If someone who was proficient in lip reading saw it, they would know that the word he was muttering was spirit ginseng. Oxen opened its eyes and glanced at him, then closed them again and went back to sleep. Little and flew out of Drawn Rain's village and into the undulating mountain range. He freely passed through the dense forest, but he still had to avoid the fierce mountain wind from time to time. He saw a bit of fire in the distance. When he flew closer, he saw that it was the hunters of Drawn Rain's village resting by a bonfire with their weapons. Huang Binghu was discussing tactics with a few hunters in a low voice. Little An circled around a few times and listened for a while. Then, he rode the wind and flew up Bailaro Peak. He carefully examined every stream and every rock. Of course, he would occasionally be attracted by small animals passing by and forget his original goal. However, he would always quickly regain his senses and continue his search. There was only one thought in his mind: I must find the spirit ginseng. Only then can I help him. At the fourth watch, the ginseng foragers launched a night attack, but they were repelled by the prepared Huang Binghu. However, neither side found the spirit ginseng. Little An was the same. He returned to the village before the sun rose. His face was full of exhaustion and he was almost tired of it. It was not easy for a child's mind to last. Furthermore, this job was too lonely for him. He had already tasted the feeling of loneliness. However, when he looked at Li Qingshan's face that was still fast asleep, a new motivation suddenly surged in his heart. He clenched his fists and dove into the locust tree wooden tablet to sleep. Early in the morning, an old hunter with a stern expression woke Li Qingshan up. "Chief Hunter, let me teach you archery." Li Qingshan noticed that the old hunter's left leg was slightly lame. However, in order not to be rude, he only glanced at it. He did not expect the old hunter to have already noticed it. He calmly said, "You were bitten by a wolf. Follow me." A group of teenagers were already waiting in an empty space on the west side of the village. The older ones were about the same age as Li Qingshan, while the younger ones still had snot dripping from their noses. However, all of them carried a hunting bow on their backs. Their gazes towards Li Qingshan were filled with wariness and hostility. "Grandpa Zong, is he coming with us as well?" Grandpa Zong nodded slightly and did not explain further. He directly said, "Draw the bow." The group of teenagers immediately stopped talking. They drew their hunting bows and aimed at the target in the distance. Grandpa Zong corrected their postures one by one and explained the essentials of archery, leaving Li Qingshan to the side. Li Qingshan did not feel bored and listened attentively to the side. After an hour, Grandpa Zong ordered the others to rest and finally said to Li Qingshan, "Train your strength first." He pointed to the stone dumbbells at the side. Li Qingshan went to grab the stone dumbbells. Compared to teachers like Oxen who did not care about your life, this level of cold treatment was still acceptable. Grandpa Zong revealed a slightly surprised expression. He did not like Li Qingshan, but he could not disobey Huang Binghu's orders. Therefore, he had purposely given him the cold treatment to train his temperament. He did not expect him to not be angry at all, which was completely different from what he had expected. He thought to himself, "No wonder the chief hunter thinks so highly of him. Brat, where did you come from?" The teenagers could not help but approach him. Their faces were filled with provocation. Crouching Ox Village. "Mitch, you're just a farmer, yet you have the strength of an ox. I heard you even brought an ox with you. We don't need oxen here, so let's kill it and eat its meat." Li Qingshan could not stoop to their level and shout about killing him, but he would not allow them to insult him as they pleased either. His arms suddenly exerted force and he threw the 2 stone dumbbells that weighed several dozen kilograms high into the air. Holy shit! The teenagers scattered in all directions in fear. If the stone dumbbells that weighed several dozen kilograms fell down, they would definitely have their brains smashed to pieces. The stone dumbbells fell heavily. Li Qingshan did not dodge at all. Instead, he focused all of his attention and grasped the timing. He grabbed the stone dumbbells and twisted his body to nullify the force of the impact. He looked at them with a smile. The group of youngsters were dumbstruck, and they made a series of swallowing sounds. How much strength was needed to lift those 2 stone dumbbells? Most of them could do it, but throwing them so high up in the air was impossible, let alone catching them again. Chapter 25. Grandpa Zong was finally shocked, born with great strength. He then shook his head. "I forgot, you practice external hard martial arts, so it's not surprising that you have a bit more strength. Archery isn't just about having great strength. Take this. Grandpa Zong took the hunting bow from his back and tossed it to Li Qingshan. This is Grandpa Zong's bullhorn bow. It weighs 1 stone. This is Grandpa Zong's intention to make things difficult for that kid. Drawing a bow and throwing a stone lock are 2 different things. 1 stone was 120 kilograms. Normal hunting bows did not pursue power, but precision and dexterity. It was rare to find such a hard bow. If the bow was too hard, its power would increase, but if the person using the bow could not control it, the accuracy and shooting speed would be very poor. If they encountered a wild beast in the mountains, they would not be able to shoot the second arrow in time and the beast would pounce on them. Only death would await them. However, hunters who could use this kind of hard bow were all godly archers. Killing tigers and leopards in the mountains was not a problem. Li Qingshan weighed the hunting bow in his hand. It was a fine oak bow, wrapped in animal skin and wrapped in silk. The bowstring was made of ox tendon. It was light in the hand, but it was very powerful. He followed the method that Grandpa Zong had taught him just now. He lowered his waist into a horse stance and pulled the bowstring. The muscles in his body also relaxed. Grandpa Zong was surprised to find that his posture was very accurate. He remembered that he just now was watching from the side, so he gave him some pointers. Li Qingshan understood everything. In just a moment, it felt like he had put in 3 months of hard work. When learning to draw a bow, it was not easy to use a bow that was too hard. One had to start with a soft bow and shoot many arrows to practice. Only by slowly correcting the posture would one be able to increase the strength of the bow. Grandpa Zong directly gave his bullhorn bow to Li Qingshan with the intention of beating him up. Even if you had great strength and could pull it open, it was nothing if you couldn't shoot properly. However, Li Qingshan's performance was beyond his expectations. It wasn't that Li Qingshan's comprehension was far superior to others. What the ox demon's fist of great strength taught him was the most basic method of channeling qi and exerting force. As long as he grasped the key points, he would be able to master them very quickly. Sweat seeped out from Li Qingshan's forehead. Maintaining the posture of drawing the bow was indeed more exhausting than lifting the stone dumbbell. His bones and muscles were aching all over his body. This is a good way to train my strength. Although it is very tiring to train my fists are always in the air. In the future, I will need to buy a strong bow to train my strength. It will definitely be very beneficial. Alright, aim at the target and shoot an arrow for me to see, Grandpa Zong instructed. Li Qingshan put down his bow and rested for a while. Then, he picked up an arrow and drew the bow again, aiming at a target 50 paces away. Calm down, don't be in a rush to shoot, look at the target. Grandpa Zong instructed from the side. Li Qingshan's eyes stared straight at the bull's eye. Suddenly, his eyes lit up, but because it was daytime, no one noticed. Under his full attention, the target seemed to have grown bigger, no longer so unreachable. Legend has it that in ancient times, when archers practiced their archery, they would tie lice to a string and watch it day and night. They would see the lice slowly grow bigger. At first, it was as big as a car wheel, then as big as a mountain. It would fill their eyes, and when the arrow was shot, it would pierce through the lice's body. Li Qingshan had this feeling at this moment. He knew that this was most likely the effect of oxen's tears. It allowed one to see fast as slow, see far as near, and see through yin spirits. Hit. Li Qingshan suddenly had an idea. The arrow left the bow and flew towards the target. Thud. The arrow landed deeply on the wooden target, but it did not hit the bull's eye. Instead, it landed on the edge of the target, barely avoiding missing its target. Li Qingshan felt slightly embarrassed. Even though it didn't hit the bull's eye, it's still a hit. The people around him were shocked, speechless. This was the first time he shot an arrow in his life. He shot a strong bow and hit a target that was 50 steps away. Even in this village that relied on archery for a living for generations, they had never heard of someone like this. Just where did this guy come from? Grandpa Zong forced himself to remain calm. Just practice properly in the future. As an old hunter, he knew very well that this was Li Qingshan's first time shooting an arrow. He could not estimate the direction of the arrow's fall and the effects of the mountain wind. But I still feel that this bow is not strong enough. As the saying goes, draw the bow with force. Li Qingshan wanted to pursue a strong bow that could only be drawn with all his strength. Grandpa Zong did not say anything after hearing this. He took the bow from Li Qingshan's hands and shot at the target in the distance. His cloudy eyes suddenly became as sharp as an eagle's. He waved his right hand several times. Out of everyone present, only Li Qingshan could see it clearly. He fished out 3 arrows one after another. Thud. The 3 arrows formed a line and landed on the bull's eye. However, there was only one sound. There was a moment of silence before a series of cheers erupted. Rapid arrow. How could Li Qingshan not know the name of this archery skill? He had read about it in a book in his previous life, but he had treated it as an interesting thing. However, after seeing it with his own eyes, he knew that this was a true killing technique. He estimated that unless he fought in close combat, it would be difficult for him to escape this kind of archery skill. If Grandpa Zong were to ambush him, he would definitely die. Grandpa Zong looked at Li Qingshan without saying anything. Li Qingshan already understood what he meant. If he could not use this kind of archery skill, how could he talk about draw the bow with force? It was not that Grandpa Zong could not draw a heavier bow, he had just chosen the most suitable one. He walked up and bowed respectfully, saying with sincerity, "Grandpa Zong, please teach me archery. In the future, you will also be a part of my Drawn Reins village. There is no need for you to say anything. I will naturally teach you with all my heart. As for how much you can learn, that will depend on your own abilities. However, I believe that in the future, your archery skills will definitely be above mine." Grandpa Zong was happy and his expression became pleasant. He did not like Li Qingshan at first, but when Li Qingshan displayed his talent and ability, shocking him and making him lower his stance, his mood took a turn. Not only did he immediately acknowledge Li Qingshan's identity, he even began to praise him greatly. This evaluation shocked everyone. Grandpa Zong's archery skills were the best in the village, this was publicly acknowledged. Even the archery skills of the headhunter, Huang Binghu, were personally taught by him. For him to give someone such an evaluation, the entire village would probably be shocked. The group of youngsters who had originally been hostile towards Li Qingshan also surrounded him, talking all at once, faintly revealing their desire to get close to him. This was not because they were fawning over those in power, but because at their age, they had always respected the strong the most. Perhaps there were still some who were jealous and repelled him, but no one dared to look down on him or provoke him. The atmosphere in the area actually became harmonious. Li Qingshan understood more and more that if he wanted others to acknowledge him, he did not need to rely on flowery words, but rather, he needed to display sufficient ability. If he did not have this ability and wanted to rely on social skills to achieve this effect, not only would he need a very long time, he would also need to bend his back and bend his eyebrows, twisting his heart. Practicing until evening, Li Qingshan was already able to hit the bull's eye with every arrow. However, shooting an arrow like this required preparation. He was far from being able to shoot arrows as he pleased like Grandpa Zong, much less shoot arrows in rapid succession. However, in the eyes of others, this was already terrible enough. For the next few days, Li Qingshan immersed himself in archery, improving day by day. Although he did not stop practicing Ox Demon's Fist of Great Strength, the speed of his improvement was extremely slow. Finally, after enduring for a few days, Li Qingshan returned home and carefully opened the jar of wine. The thick smell of medicine and wine filled his nose. He immediately picked up the jar and took a big gulp. Chapter 26. A thick wave of heat began to boil in his stomach. He immediately got up and began to practice in the courtyard. Only when the heat in his stomach completely disappeared did he let out a long breath and stop. Usually, he would feel tired after practicing for so long, but he was still full of energy today. As expected, the medicinal wine made from ginseng was much more effective than eating meat. Furthermore, the zhengqi in his body seemed to have grown a little. Although it was very small, it was a real improvement. If the medicinal wine made from ordinary ginseng is like this, I wonder what the effects of the spiritual ginseng will be like. He had thought of this before, but when he thought of the difficulty and the consequences of obtaining the spiritual ginseng, he could only give up. In just a few days, a few hunters had been carried down the mountain. Some were dead, while others were injured. It was clear that the ginseng foragers were not easy to deal with. Although Li Qingshan had agreed to join Drawn Rain's village, it was only a temporary measure. He did not really want to participate in the conflict between the two villages. In the blink of an eye, it was the 15th day of the 8th month, mid-autumn. In the forest, Huang Binghu looked at the tired faces around him. These days, he had led the hunters through the mountains and had to be on guard at all times. Even though he had the upper hand and almost defeated the ginseng foragers, it was difficult to ensure his own safety. However, it would be difficult to ensure that one's body would be unharmed, and it would not be easy either. The spirit ginseng only existed in legends, and no one had seen it with their own eyes. There was no point in making a meaningless sacrifice. Huang Binghu let out a long sigh and gave the order to return to the village. Little Black said anxiously, "Hunting chief, you can't give up your body." Huang Binghu said, "The village is more important." Not only did they have to reunite with their families during mid-autumn, it was almost winter. The village also had to prepare for the winter. In a corner of Drawn Rain's village, in Grandpa Zong's courtyard, Huang Binghu asked with a smile, "Grandpa Zong, how is that kid?" "He is a natural godly archer. In the future, his archery skills will definitely be above yours and mine, but what? His heart is not in Drawn Rain's village. Even if we let him join, it will be useless. We are the hunting dogs that guard the mountain, but he is a wolf, and a lone wolf at that. He will definitely travel far away." "A lone wolf." That's because he hasn't seen the saying, "A lone wolf is easily destroyed, but a pack of wolves is no match for it." "I'll go see him. I don't believe that he won't be tempted by the position of Drawn Rain's village's headhunter." "You really want him to be a headhunter?" "That still depends on his methods." Huang Binghu smiled. "Qingshan, have you enjoyed your stay during this period of time?" Huang Binghu straightforwardly greeted Qingshan the moment he stepped into the courtyard. "Thank you for your concern, headhunter. I'm living very well." Ever since the news of Li Qingshan killing the 7 ginseng foragers spread throughout the village, everyone became friendly to him. However, this also meant that he had formed a mortal enemy with the Ginseng King village. Those ginseng foragers were not kind people, so he could only rely on the Drawn Rain's village to survive. But could he really only accept this arrangement? Li Qingshan said, "Hunting chief, I would like to spar with you again." Huang Binghu's surprised gaze met Li Qingshan's eyes, which were filled with confidence. Huang Binghu said, "All right, then let me see the results of your recent days." "Ha!" Li Qingshan did not wait for Huang Binghu to get into a fighting stance and suddenly dashed forward. Without any fancy moves, he fiercely punched Huang Binghu's chest, and the faint sound of the air being torn could be heard. "Good lad." Huang Binghu used his arm to block, and with a pa sound, he staggered back 3 steps before stopping. Shaking his aching arm, he had a look of astonishment on his face. What great strength! Although he had not clashed with Li Qingshan head-on the last time they fought, he reckoned that his strength at that time should not have been this great. Li Qingshan said, "Now watch this move." He immediately dashed over and continued to attack. His fists continuously struck his opponent's chest, and his attacks were like a violent storm. He displayed the power of his fists to the extreme, and his aura was extremely fierce. Huang Binghu had been careless for a moment and lost the initiative, falling into a disadvantageous position. However, it also aroused the heroic spirit in his chest. "I don't believe that you can really beat me in strength." He circulated his inner force, which flowed along his meridians to his arms. With the surge of inner force, his arms seemed to thicken as he met Li Qingshan's fists head-on. As a martial artist, all their martial arts were based on this inner force. By doing this, he was already using his true strength. Peng 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 peng. The two's arms crossed, clashing head-on. Every time they clashed, there would be a loud sound of flesh and bone colliding, as if wild beasts were tearing at each other. It was extremely rough and barbaric. Huang Binghu was, after all, very experienced. Seeing the right opportunity, He smashed his fist towards Li Qingshan's chest. Li Qingshan actually did not block or dodge, and instead punched towards Huang Binghu's face. Huang Binghu thought to himself, "I've bitterly cultivated my inner force for many years. The strength of my fist can even kill a calf. Even if you practice an external hard body technique, you will still be injured." As for Li Qingshan's fist, he was even more disdainful of it. His fist had struck Li Qingshan first, and Li Qingshan's figure would definitely freeze for a moment. With a pang, his fist struck Li Qingshan's chest. As expected, Li Qingshan's figure paused for a moment, but he immediately recovered and was not affected. Huang Binghu was greatly shocked, and hastily used a lazy donkey roll. The wind from the fist brushed past his cheek, causing him to feel a dull pain. Li Qingshan chuckled and stood still, no longer giving chase. Huang Binghu stood up. "You're actually fine?" He was the clearest about the power of his fist. Even if Li Qingshan had used external force to block the strength of his fist, he would not have been able to block the true qi contained in his fist. However, it had not been of any use. Li Qingshan rubbed his chest. "It really hurts." Just now, there seemed to be a wave of qi that had passed through his skin and entered his body. However, it was immediately dispelled by the true qi in his body, and did not cause any damage at all. After that, he immediately regained his breath and almost hit Huang Binghu. Using Huang Binghu's words to explain it, this was the difference in quality between acquired inner force and innate true qi. Huang Binghu did not know whether to laugh or cry. His fist that was filled with confidence only received such an evaluation. However, all martial artists had a competitive heart. He shouted, "Then eat a few more of my punches." The two of them fought again. This time, Huang Binghu did not hold back and used all of his strength. His figure became much faster, and Li Qingshan could not block it. His fists rained down on Li Qingshan's body. From an outsider's point of view, Huang Binghu was suppressing Li Qingshan and had the upper hand. However, the two of them had different feelings. Li Qingshan only felt that Huang Binghu's movements seemed to have slowed down and become less unpredictable. Even when his fists landed on Huang Binghu's body, it only caused him a slight pain. Thus, he simply ignored him and focused on attacking. He was like a reef in a storm, not moving at all. Meanwhile, the more Huang Binghu fought, the more shocked he became. Li Qingshan's speed, reaction, and strength were all much stronger than the last time they fought. It was as if he had become a completely different person. He could no longer easily attack Li Qingshan's vital points, but it was completely useless to attack other areas. Furthermore, during the battle, Li Qingshan's attacks became more and more methodical. From time to time, he would use one or two extremely exquisite fist techniques, causing Huang Binghu to fall into a dangerous situation. Huang Binghu had to use his many years of experience to resolve the situation. The ferocity of Li Qingshan's fists told him that he would be finished as long as he was hit by one of his fists. The distance between the two of them was rapidly shrinking. As a result, such a strange scene appeared. One of them was punched repeatedly, but his aura was getting stronger and stronger. Meanwhile, the other was not injured at all, but his aura was getting weaker and weaker. Huang Binghu's forehead began to sweat, and he felt tired. However, Li Qingshan's expression did not change, and his heart did not beat. Oxen were originally animals with great endurance. The higher one cultivated, the more obvious the gap between magical powers and martial arts became. Chapter 27. Li Qingshan let out a long sigh. How satisfying. Huang Binghu's arms were trembling. That was the result of colliding with Li Qingshan's hand. He sized up Li Qingshan from afar with a strange expression. "Just how did you train?" This kind of improvement speed was simply monstrous. He had originally thought highly of Li Qingshan's will and martial arts, thinking that he had discovered a piece of unpolished jade in a pile of rubble. He wanted to polish it to see if he had the qualifications to take over the position of hunting head, but in the end, he realized that he had still underestimated Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan thought for a moment. "Recently, I've been drinking medicinal wine brewed with ginseng. It's a prescription left behind by my master." Huang Binghu hesitated for a moment. "Can I take a look?" Originally, The rules of the pugilistic world forbade one from casually inquiring about such things, but he really wanted to know what was going on. Li Qingshan said without hesitation, "No problem." Huang Binghu asked about the prescription, and Li Qingshan told him the truth. Huang Binghu nodded. "This prescription is indeed exquisite, but isn't the medicinal strength a little too strong? Too much ginseng has been used, so you can't drink too much. Just a small cup every day is enough." Other than that, it was not much different from ordinary medicinal wine. He even specially went to Li Qingshan's room and tasted it. The conclusion he came to was the same. He did not believe that just drinking medicinal wine brewed with ginseng would allow one's martial arts to improve so quickly. Then wouldn't everyone in the Ginseng King village be peerless experts? But it would be too inappropriate to continue asking, so he could only suppress his doubts. He did not think about the martial arts that Li Qingshan practiced. After all, there were no extraordinary external martial arts techniques. Of course, Li Qingshan could not tell him that he drank this medicinal wine by the bowl. He drank at least a few big bowls every day, and he had already drunk most of it during this period of time. "That's right. What grade is my martial arts now?" "Barely qualified as a third rate." Huang Binghu still remembered his evaluation of Li Qingshan a few days ago. It would not be a problem for him to become a third-grade expert. In the blink of an eye, it had become true. It was like a dream. "Only third-rate?" Li Qingshan asked greedily. Huang Binghu's eyes widened. Anyone who could train their martial arts to the third rate could already be considered an expert, yet this fellow was still not satisfied. Didn't that mean that his martial arts were also only third-rate? He was also someone who had been the headhunter of the Drawn Reins village for many years. He was not willing to be outdone by this brat. "However, my expertise is not in martial arts, but in archery. In terms of martial arts, the people of the Ginseng King village are also slightly stronger than us. However, only we dare to call ourselves the Drawn Reins village. With our powerful bows and crossbows, even a first-rate expert would not dare to take them lightly. Moreover, the other reason was him. His illness was close to incurable, but even though he was called Sickly Tiger, the word illness was the most taboo for him. No matter what, he would not use this as a reason. "Yes, I've been practicing rapid arrow recently and can already shoot 3 arrows in a row. Unfortunately, my accuracy is still a bit lacking. Please give me some pointers, hunting chief." Li Qingshan had seen Huang Binghu's archery with his own eyes, so he naturally did not dare to underestimate him. Being able to shoot 3 arrows in a row. "You've only been practicing archery for a month." Huang Binghu felt that he had suffered too many blows today. He waved his hand. "Tomorrow, go ask Grandpa Zong for pointers. I also want to go home for a reunion dinner." He understood in his heart that this brat might really have the aptitude to roam the martial world. There was no need to mention the matter of being a headhunter. If he had this kind of speed of improvement back then, he would definitely not have returned to the Drawn Reins village. "That's right, it's the Mid-Autumn Festival again." Li Qingshan looked up at the sky. The full moon had just risen, but he had no relatives to reunite with. However, he still had a demon and a ghost by his side, so he could have a reunion dinner. Thus, he went to make preparations. He prepared grass for oxen, wine and meat for himself, and incense, candles, and paper money for little Anne. Everything was in order, but there was no sign of little Anne. "Brother Nyo, where did little Anne go?" "I don't know," Li Qingshan mumbled. "That brat has been playing wild lately. He doesn't bother me anymore. How strange. Let's just wait for him." The full moon gradually rose, and there was only silence on Bailaro Peak. The bright moon shone down its clear radiance from the horizon. A few people wearing bamboo hats were lying in the lush grass, looking up at the highest cliff of Bailaro Peak, as if they were waiting for something. "We've spent so much effort, so many people have died, and we've become sworn enemies with the people of Drawn Reins village, but we haven't even seen a hair of the spiritual ginseng. Right now, even the people of Drawn Reins village have retreated down the mountain to reunite with their families, but we still have to stand guard. What is the Manor Lord thinking about? What do you know? The spiritual ginseng is a spiritual object. After being alarmed, it will naturally hide and not appear. However, tonight is the night of the full moon, so the spiritual ginseng will definitely appear and absorb the moonlight. The Manor Lord has already predicted this. As long as we obtain the spiritual ginseng, the Manor Lord's power will increase greatly. Why would we be afraid of Drawn Rain's village? When the time comes, we'll flatten Drawn Rain's village, rob them of all their food and wealth, and play with all their women. Only then will we be able to take our revenge. Quiet, don't ruin the Manor Lord's plans, someone at the side chided in a low voice. The voices of the people immediately quieted down, leaving only the low chirping of the dying autumn insects. The full moon rose high in the sky. A small person about a foot tall suddenly burrowed out of the ground, hesitantly walking towards the high cliff where the moonlight was the brightest. Upon closer inspection, it was not a small person, but a ginseng. However, it vaguely had the shape of a person. Under the night sky, it looked like a small person. When it walked, it was light as if it was floating. The ginseng foragers lying in ambush in the underbrush immediately held their breaths, not daring to make a sound. They had never seen such a miraculous spiritual herb in their entire lives. The spiritual ginseng looked left and right, as if confirming that there was no one around, then floated to the highest point of the cliff and settled down. Strands of moonlight twined around its body. Attack! With a command, the ginseng foragers attacked together. A net descended from the sky, pouncing towards the spiritual ginseng. The spiritual ginseng was immersed in the moonlight, and before it could react, it was caught in the net and lifted off the ground. The net was made of cow tendons, and no matter how it struggled, it could not break free. The 4 ginseng foragers beamed with joy, and moved closer to take a closer look. There are many cliffs on this Bailaro peak, and there are people lying in ambush everywhere. This spiritual ginseng just had to fall into our hands. The heavens are really helping us. When we get back, we'll definitely be able to get some soup to drink. Who knows, we might even be able to become an expert. Who knows, if we eat the whole ginseng, we might even become immortals. The few of them laughed heartily, and the smile of one of the ginseng foragers suddenly froze. A snow-white blade had pierced through his throat, and he struggled to turn his head. The tip of the blade had already retracted, and he immediately fell to the ground. When he fell, he could only vaguely see a black shadow. The other ginseng foragers reacted, and with angry roars, they pulled out their swords and slashed at the black shadow. The blade of the sword swept past their necks like a spiritual snake, and a few drops of blood splattered. In an instant, 4 ginseng foragers had died a violent death, and they did not even have the chance to retaliate. It was evident that the person who had come was highly skilled. I didn't expect the rumors to be true. H, you bunch of country bumpkins are not worthy of enjoying such a spiritual item. A young man dressed in luxurious clothing elegantly sheathed his long sword. At the same time, he stretched out his hand to grab the spiritual ginseng that had fallen to the ground. He could not help but feel excited. As long as he could get his hands on the spiritual ginseng, his skills would definitely increase greatly. Chapter 28. The man was startled when he saw the spiritual ginseng bobbing up and down in the air. He became anxious and used his qinggong to grab the spiritual ginseng, but it flew straight down the cliff. He could only watch it disappear into the darkness, feeling so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. No, I must get this spiritual ginseng. When I go back, I will ask Father to send more people to search the mountain. The man thought that it was the spirit ginseng's own miraculous ability, but if he had opened his spirit eyes, he would have seen the spirit ginseng being tightly grasped by a pair of pale little hands. He was the mantis stalking the cicada, but he did not guard against the oriole behind. A ghost that he could not see had been hiding in the darkness. Under the cliff, Little and used all his strength to grab the spiritual ginseng and floated towards Drawn Rain's village with the night wind. He was so happy that he was about to explode. Fortunately, he had been nourishing his spiritual body in the locust wood tablet, so he had the strength to grab such a heavy thing. In the courtyard, Li Qingshan yawned. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as he saw Little and float over from afar. "Little brat, where did you run off to?" Little and bit his lips and suppressed the joy in his heart as he held the spiritual ginseng in front of him. "What is this?" "Ginseng." Li Qingshan took the spiritual ginseng and sniffed it lightly. A strange fragrance entered his nose and he immediately felt his spirit rise. The true qi in his body seemed to be much more active. Li Qingshan suddenly thought of something. This is spiritual ginseng. He couldn't believe that the spiritual herb that caused the two villages to fight and kill each other and cost dozens of lives was now in his hands. Oxen chewed on the grass lazily. Why else do you think this little brat runs out every night? Li Qingshan saw that Little An's face was full of exhaustion, but he was extremely happy. He even used his little finger to point at his mouth as if he wanted him to eat it. These days, Little An went out every dusk and only returned near dawn. He didn't talk much with him. He thought that Little An yearned for freedom and wanted to let him go. Only now did he know that it was all for him. You brat! Li Qingshan felt a lump in his throat. Why didn't you say so earlier? Little An smiled shyly and pointed at his mouth. Even if Li Qingshan had a heart of stone, he couldn't help but be moved by those pure and innocent eyes. He asked Oxen, this spiritual ginseng, Little An can also use it, right? Oxen said, this spirit ginseng is a rare innate item. The spiritual energy contained in it is beneficial even to evil ghosts. However, if you use it, you can easily achieve the strength of an ox. Are you willing to use it? Li Qingshan said, what's there to be reluctant about? The spiritual ginseng was obtained by Little An in the first place. Just let Little An consume it. I'll just slowly cultivate the divine ability. His principle of doing things would not change because of the temptation of the spiritual ginseng. Little An immediately retreated and waved his hand. All right, I will remember your kindness. Little An just shook his head. In the end, he simply turned into a wisp of green smoke and burrowed into the locust wood tablet. Hey, come out quickly. If you don't want it, I'll throw it away. Oxen suddenly shouted, since he has the heart, why are you so stubborn and like a little girl? Can't you find something hundreds or thousands of times better than this spiritual ginseng for him in the future? Li Qingshan shuddered inside. He nodded. Brother Ox is right. I've been too stubborn. All right, come on out. I'll be ingesting the spiritual ginseng. Xiaoan immediately flew out. But this thing should belong to you. I can't take it alone. If you refuse again, I'll be angry. Little An just now agreed. Li Qingshan shook the spiritual ginseng in his hand and said, Brother Nyo, how do I use this thing? Little An's body of evil ghost could not eat anything. Oxen said, go find a needle and take out a drop of ginseng liquid. Li Qingshan found a steel needle and pierced it into the spiritual ginseng. The spiritual ginseng trembled in his hand, but he was not soft-hearted to a plant. A drop of ginseng liquid seeped into the spiritual ginseng and hung on the tip of the needle. Oxen said, well, drip it into his beer. Beer! Little An, look up. Xiaoan hurriedly raised his head. The ginseng liquid dripped down from the tip of the needle and landed in between Xiaoan's eyebrows. His body trembled like water ripples. The ginseng liquid in his body suddenly emitted a resplendent light. Little An closed his eyes tightly. The expression on his face alternated between pain and joy until the light disappeared. Just now, he calmed down and slowly opened his eyes. There was something else in his eyes. 2 lines of tears fell down. What's wrong? Oxen said, you must have remembered something. Is that so? Little An, do you remember who you are and where your home is? Li Qingshan knelt down and looked into his eyes. Little An hesitated for a long time and pointed in a direction. South. Li Qingshan asked, is your home in the south? Which city is it? How far is it from here? But these questions, Little An could not answer. He could only shake his head blankly. Li Qingshan suddenly pulled out his hunting knife and started carving on the locust wood plate. Sawdust flew everywhere. The word south appeared on the originally blank side of the plate. He raised it in front of Little An. Under the moonlight, the young man knelt on one knee and promised the child seriously, no matter how many mountains and rivers there are, sooner or later, I will send you home. The child looked at his figure in a daze. He would never forget it. Just like the spot between his eyebrows where the ginseng liquid dripped, there was a red mole. Li Qingshan hung the wooden plate back on his waist and asked Little An if he felt any changes. He did not know if the spiritual ginseng was useful. Little An leaped into the air and flew around the courtyard like a whirlwind. He carried the hunting knife in Li Qingshan's hand and danced around the courtyard. If it was a normal person, they would only see a knife dancing on its own as if it had a spirit. Not only did Little An's speed become faster, but he could also control heavier objects and become more powerful. If it was a sneak attack, even a martial arts master would not be able to escape death. Brother Nyo, do I have to use it like this? That would be too wasteful. The best way to use this ginseng is to combine it with other spiritual herbs and refine it into a pill. But you don't have this condition. You can handle this spiritual ginseng like other ginseng and soak it in wine. This way, the spiritual ginseng will not wither and the spiritual energy on it will seep into the wine, turning it into spiritual wine. You can also slowly absorb the medicinal energy inside. Oh right, don't mix it with other medicinal herbs. This is a good idea. Li Qingshan knew that he could not digest the spiritual ginseng in one go. Otherwise, it would not be a great improvement in his skills, but an explosion. It's just that I don't feel at ease if I don't carry this treasure with me. Before he finished speaking, a wine gourd flew towards Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan grabbed it and said, "Thank you, Brother Nyo." He put the spiritual ginseng into the gourd and filled it with strong wine before hanging it on his waist. He crossed his arms and his body was strong. The huge wine gourd hung on his body. Although he was still young, he was full of a bold and unruly aura. Little Anne, don't you think I'm becoming more and more like a person of the pugilistic world? Little Anne also laughed, but his expression changed to one of worry. However, he could not speak, so he was a little anxious. Suddenly, he had an idea and squatted on the ground. Chapter 29. Li Qingshan hurriedly asked, "You can read. Did you remember it just now?" Little An nodded and showed Li Qingshan the words he had written. Only now did Li Qingshan realize that someone else had interfered and attempted to steal the spirit ginseng. Their martial arts were very powerful. Since they had seen this item, they would definitely not give up and would definitely think of a way to find it. Looks like I still need to be more careful and not leak any information. However, when my magical powers advance further and I cultivate the strength of an ox, I won't be afraid of anyone. The longer the spirit ginseng was brewed, the better it would be. If it was too thick, Li Qingshan would not be able to digest it. Thus, after waiting for 3 to 5 days, Li Qingshan drank his first mouthful of spirit wine. A strange fragrance spread in his mouth. The taste was not strong, but rather faint. Extremely pure spiritual energy spread throughout his body. He did not dare to be negligent. He circulated his magical powers and digested this spiritual energy. To his surprise, he discovered that the effects of this mouthful of spirit wine were much better than drinking a jar of wine brewed from ordinary ginseng. The true qi in his body had doubled. Although ordinary ginseng could replenish vitality, it was still an acquired item and could not be of much help to true qi. On the other hand, Ox Demon's fist of great strength focused more on body cultivation than qi cultivation, so the growth of his true qi was not fast. This spirit ginseng was a true carnate item. It was the best at replenishing spiritual energy, which was why it had such an effect. If this continued, it would not be long before he could achieve the effect of releasing his true qi. At that time, he could also call himself a carnate expert. Brother Ox, I once promised to drink all the finest wine in the world. Now, I've more or less fulfilled my promise. After drinking this spirit wine, drinking ordinary wine would be tasteless. Oxen only sneered in response. At this time, there was a commotion outside and the sound of many dogs barking. Huang Binghu brought the hunters of the village to Li Qingshan's door and invited him to participate in the autumn hunt. Autumn was the best season for hunting. Not only did people have to prepare food for the winter, but the animals also had to do the same. All of them had to be plump and strong. It was an important gathering for Drawn Rain's village. Many big families would organize large-scale hunting activities at this time of the year, not to catch prey, but to train their descendants and cater to the killing intent of autumn. Huang Binghu said, You've only learned archery and have yet to learn the true way of hunting. This time, when we enter the mountains, you'll follow me." Ever since the last time he fought with Li Qingshan, he no longer treated Li Qingshan as an ordinary youngster. Li Qingshan thought about it and still refused. "Thank you for your kind offer, but I want to hunt alone." Before Huang Binghu could say anything, the other hunters started discussing. "What? Alone? Not only has he never hunted before, he doesn't even have a decent hunting dog. Are you really not afraid of the beasts in the mountains?" Although they admired Li Qingshan's skill in killing the 7 ginseng foragers, they could not underestimate him in his area of expertise. Huang Binghu advised, "Hunting doesn't depend on good archery and skill." He suddenly remembered Grandpa Zong's evaluation, a lone wolf. Li Qingshan still shook his head. He only wanted to learn archery so that he could use it to kill enemies and defend himself. As for hunting, there was no need for it. If he wants to be alone, then he'll be alone. Let's see what he can catch in the end. I don't think he'll even be able to catch a rabbit. Li Qingshan smiled, but did not comment. Suddenly, someone said in a strange tone, "He's already been freeloading in the village for so long, yet he still refuses to follow the arrangements. Does he really want to continue freeloading?" These days, all of Li Qingshan's food in the village had been delivered by Huang Binghu's people, so he must have used the village's resources. His appetite was also very small, so it was only natural that he would attract some dissatisfaction. Huang Binghu immediately berated that person. "Qingshan is also a member of our village. How can you be so calculative about some food?" Li Qingshan's expression turned serious as he cupped his fists and said, "Hunting chief, you don't have to feel bad. I, Li Qingshan, am someone who clearly distinguishes between kindness and hatred. I will never take advantage of others. I will definitely pay back double for what I've consumed in the village these days. Qingshan, there's no need for that." Huang Binghu was furious at the person who said this. "I wholeheartedly wanted to rope him into the village, yet you people are pushing him away for a few catties of meat." Li Qingshan did not want to blend in with any place. There was no need, nor was he in the mood. "I heard that the village has a competition every year during the autumn hunt to see who can hunt the most prey. The winner gets a prize, so I'll participate this year as well." Huang Binghu could not dissuade him, so Li Qingshan made some preparations. Under everyone's mocking gazes, he took a normal hunting bow and entered the mountains. The hunters went to the North Mountain, but Li Qingshan did not want to mix with them. To the west was the 10,000 Great Mountains. He understood the mysteries of this world, so he was even more unwilling to take risks. To the south was Bailaro Peak, a troublesome place. Therefore, he could only head east. On Bailaro Peak, a group of people wearing the same clothes and carrying long swords gathered together. The person in the lead was the young man who had almost obtained the spiritual ginseng after killing the ginseng forager. "Cert. Even if we have to turn Bailaro Peak upside down, we must find the spiritual ginseng." "Yes, young master," everyone answered in unison. Using their exquisite qinggong, they flew to various parts of Bailaro Peak. Li Qingshan went deep into the mountain forest. He did not know how to distinguish the tracks of birds and beasts, nor did he know how to hide his tracks. He did not know how to set up traps, nor did he have the cooperation of other hunters. He did not even have a hunting dog. If such a person said he wanted to hunt, any hunter would laugh. However, he was not in a hurry. He sat on a wooden stake in the mountain and meditated until dusk. Just now, he opened his eyes and said with a smile, "Little Anne." A gust of cold wind swept through the forest. After a while, it blew back. Li Qingshan stood up and walked through the forest. Not long after, he found a deer that had fallen to the ground. There was not a single wound on its body. After Little Anne's strength increased, his own yin qi also became heavier. He discovered that the deer only needed to pounce on him before it immediately fell unconscious and died on the ground. Li Qingshan smiled and said, "I have Little Anne with me. Naturally, I don't need to learn any hunting skills. It's a waste of time. They actually look down on me. Let's catch a few more prey and show them." Ever since the Mid-Autumn Festival, Li Qingshan was no longer as indulgent towards Little Anne. Instead, he had more control over him. Now, he did not hold back when he used him. Naturally, he did not need to be so courteous towards people he was close to. Little Ann nodded excitedly and rushed into the forest like the wind. Although the beasts in the forest were vigilant, they could not be wary of this invisible little demon. They all fell to the ground, waiting for Li Qingshan to pick them up. Li Qingshan was idle and bored, so he began to practice his archery. He shot the startled birds in the forest. Shooting moving things was indeed much more difficult. Out of every 3 arrows, 2 would miss. However, as he gradually got used to it, the number of missed shots decreased. At dawn, in the Drawn Reins village, a few hunters brought the hunters down the mountain. The large group of people and horses were still in the mountains to hunt together. In an open space in the middle of the village, the highly respected Grandpa Zong was in charge of counting the prey. A smile appeared on his stern face. The harvest is not bad. It's a good sign. Then, the women and children who stayed behind in the village handled the prey, tanned the leather, and marinated the meat. That Li Qingshan hasn't returned yet? There were already people who could not wait to see Li Qingshan make a fool of himself. He went into the mountains to hunt alone. How could he return so quickly? Before the voice had died away, someone shouted, "Li Qingshan is back." What is that? The few people looked in the direction of the voice. The first thing they saw was not a person, but a bunch of furry monsters, like the legendary savages. Li Qingshan bent over, carrying deer, elk, and so on. There were quite a few large prey that weighed several hundred kilograms. His waist was covered in pheasants and hares. Along the way down the mountain, even he was covered in sweat. He said with difficulty, "Oi, Xiaowen, isn't this a little too much? It's heavy." Chapter 30. With a boom, Li Qingshan placed all of the prey before Grandpa Zong. "This should be enough to make up for my rations in the village during this period of time." There was a series of gulps in the surroundings. In particular, the hunters who had just left the mountain were completely dumbfounded. Their entire group had worked together and prepared meticulously, yet the prey they had hunted was actually less than Li Qingshan alone. Grandpa Zong discovered that many of the prey did not have any wounds at all. "How did you hunt?" This was the question that everyone present wanted to ask. Li Qingshan thought about it and replied, "I caught them with my hand." Everyone collapsed in laughter, but they could not even bring themselves to question him. Li Qingshan glanced at the prey the hunters had brought down the mountain. "You've hunted so much already. You're almost catching up to me." "No, I need to work harder as well, or I won't be able to win." Grandpa Zong was unable to explain to him that the prey had to be split among the hunters. On average, each hunter would not even get a single prey. On the first day of hunting, Li Qingshan had basically already won. Li Qingshan ate a mouthful of food before going back up the mountain. The hunters returned to the northern mountain in a daze and told him about what had happened in the village. "How's that possible? You must have been drinking in the village." "It's true. There really was this much prey," they explained in a hurry. "That kid." Huang Binghu exhaled deeply and called out, "Let's all work harder. Don't fall behind him. If all of us together aren't as good as him alone, then we can all go slit our throat." The hunters answered loudly, and their morale skyrocketed. Huang Binghu silently suppressed his coughing fit. He looked at his palm and saw a patch of dark red blood. On the mountain path, a group of people traveled slowly. In the center was a small sedan chair, carried by 4 porters and surrounded by over a dozen servants. A chubby hand lifted the curtain of the sedan chair, revealing a chubby face. He asked, "Advisor, how far are we from Qingyang City?" It was clearly late autumn, but he was still covered in sweat as he sat in the sedan chair. A butler said, "Sir, it's still far away. It'll be good enough if we can get there tonight." The fat official put down the curtain of the sedan chair and muttered, "I have great knowledge of managing the affairs of the world, but you actually want me to go to such a remote place to be a county magistrate?" The magistrate is really confused. "My lord, you shouldn't speak carelessly. It wouldn't be good if the prefectural magistrate heard about it." The fat lord snorted twice and said no more. At this moment, the mountain wind suddenly blew, startling countless forest birds. A woo! A roar came from the dense forest beside the mountain path. The sedan chair fell to the ground with a thud, and the fat official's eyes and mouth became crooked. What's going on? Is someone trying to murder me? Sigh. Sir, it's old tiger. The advisor fell to the ground and pointed forward with a trembling finger. A brightly colored ferocious tiger leaped down from the slope and landed on the mountain path. It stared at the palanquin covetously. The word king on its forehead looked very majestic. Who? Tiger? What? It's a tiger. Quick, someone come and take down this beast for me. The advisor was about to cry. They've all run away. The fat official lifted the curtain of the sedan chair to take a look. As expected, all the bearers, servants, and servants in the surroundings had all run away. When they heard the tiger's roar, they reacted. The working people at the bottom were still very vigilant. The ancients said, the mention of a tiger makes one pale. In this era, there wasn't a single commoner who wasn't afraid of tigers. Ferocious tigers eating humans was also a very common thing. Advisor, you're really loyal. You didn't let down my great kindness. The fat official was moved. The advisor instinctively said, thank you for your praise, sir. Even if this lowly one's body is torn to pieces, it's hard for me to repay you. He cursed in his heart, fuck, I can't walk. Hold on, I'll go get reinforcements. The fat official nimbly crawled out of the sedan chair and wanted to escape. The advisor hugged the fat official's leg. Sir, don't leave this lowly one behind. Seeing this lump of fat, the ferocious tiger's eyes seemed to light up. Just as it was about to pounce, its ears suddenly twitched, and it shrank its body to face the forest. The vegetation in the forest swayed and rustled. It was getting closer and closer, and its momentum was even greater than the ferocious tiger's appearance just now. What is this? The advisor mumbled. A figure leaped out of the forest. It was a youth. His young face couldn't be considered handsome, but it was full of vigor. He landed on the mountain path nimbly. His face was that of a ferocious tiger, and he bared his teeth with a smile. What a rare and good prey. The ferocious tiger seemed to know that the person coming was not easy to deal with. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws to threaten him, but it was useless. Its body shook, and it pounced forward with a roar. Li Qingshan's foot landed firmly on the ground, and his hands grabbed the tiger's two claws. The tiger's mouth, which was full of fangs, was right in front of him, and a fishy smell hit his face. He shouted in a deep voice, and his vital energy surged. He exerted force in his arms and flipped the ferocious tiger, which weighed several hundred kilograms, onto the ground. He pounced on the tiger's back. He had never dealt with a tiger before. He had only seen Wu Song fight a tiger in water margin, so he copied him. He grabbed the tiger's back and punched it randomly. The ferocious tiger roared out in pain and bent its body violently. Li Qingshan was sent flying. He thought, reality really is different from what's written in books. The true qi in his body sank, and he landed firmly on the ground. He was about to deal with it carefully. However, the ferocious tiger glanced at him and let out a growl before turning around and fleeing. The fat official and the advisor were both stunned by what had happened just now. Only now did they return to their senses, and they were overjoyed. Young hero, warrior, I am the district magistrate of Qingyang. If you chase away this tiger, I will reward you handsomely. However, Li Qingshan did not even look at them. He yelled out, where do you think you're going? He strode over and grabbed the tiger's tail that was like a steel whip. However, the tail was slippery, so it was difficult to grab. How could Li Qingshan let go of such a great prey before him? He chased after the tiger. The fat official and the advisor only returned to their senses after quite a while. They looked at one another. The autumn hunt ended, and the Drawn Reins village was filled with a joyous atmosphere. Li Qingshan returned to the village as well. He was covered in many wounds, such that he seemed to be in a rather sorry shape. However, when everyone saw him, they all revealed expressions of respect. It was not because of his wounds, but because of the prey on his shoulder. He was carrying an adult tiger on his shoulder. He had only chased after the tiger for a day and a night in the forest. He had only managed to make it through the endurance granted to him by the ox demon's fist of great strength. If it were not for Little Anne helping to track him at night, he would have almost lost him several times. However, even Little Anne was unable to approach the king of the mountains. Ferocious tigers possessed an innate dignity that could subdue ghosts. As a matter of fact, tiger diamonds that had developed into diamonds could even turn the people they ate into diamonds. The children in the village ran around Li Qingshan. Their eyes were filled with admiration. Huang Binghu personally went out to receive him before declaring him first. No one in the village dared to defy him. Not only were tigers extremely terrifying wild beasts to regular people, but to hunters as well. Regular hunting bows could not kill tigers at all. Instead, it would incite the tiger's ferocity. Using a hunting knife to fight a tiger in close combat would only lead to death. Li Qingshan had killed the tiger, so he seemed to possess the might of a tiger. I don't have anything valuable on me. I'll use this stone splitter bow as a reward for the autumn hunt. Huang Binghu suddenly removed the large bow from his back. Chapter 31. Hunting Chief, you mustn't do that. The other hunters tried to dissuade him in a hurry. Li Qingshan was surprised as well. Huang Binghu actually wanted to give his personal bow to him. The meaning behind this was not just a bow. He turned him down. Hunting Chief, a gentleman doesn't take what others like. I can't accept this wager, so just treat it as a joke. Huang Binghu stroked the bow gently and said to himself, this stone splitter bow has been with me for many years, so it's quite convenient to use. It's also helped me make a name for myself in the Jianghu. Now that I don't have much time left, I'd like to choose a good master for it. I heard you found Grandpa Zong's bow too light. This stone splitter bow is an iron bow with a strength of 3 stones. Even regular practitioners of martial arts can't use it. Here, don't dilly-dally. Huang Binghu pushed the stone splitter bow to Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan gripped the bow and felt a heaviness in his hand. He recalled Huang Binghu's elegance when he stood on the rock and killed people like he was slaughtering dogs. Yes, this bow was not suited for hunting. It was more suited for fighting on the battlefield. It was a true weapon for killing. He fiddled with the bowstring with his fingers. There were metal threads mixed in, so they were extremely sharp. Regular people had to wear rings to use it, but with the ox demon forges its hide, he did not mind. Huang Binghu seemed to want to entrust his son to him. He did not say it explicitly, but everyone present could tell. However, no one objected. Not only was this because of Huang Binghu's might, but Li Qingshan had also proven his strength before everyone. There was no need to ask whether Li Qingshan had the ability to lead, or whether the villagers were convinced. Obeying the strong was a human instinct, just like a pack of wolves. The Drawn Reins village was a pack of wolves. Huang Binghu wanted Li Qingshan to replace him as the Wolf King. This was a decision he had made after a long period of consideration. The Drawn Reins village had always been disliked by the government, and they had become sworn enemies with the Ginseng King village. They seemed impressive, but they were actually surrounded by danger. There were talented people in the village, but none of them could control the situation. Only Li Qingshan could do this. Li Qingshan held the stone splitter bow and felt like he was dreaming. A few months ago, he was still the most inconspicuous, lowly cowherd in the village. A few months later, he had the opportunity to become the renowned hunting chief of the Drawn Reins village, but he did not accept it. Hunting chief, I'll accept this bow. Thank you for your kindness, but I've actually come to bid you farewell today. With that, there was an uproar. Everyone felt like Li Qingshan did not know how to appreciate his kindness. Even though Huang Binghu understood Li Qingshan's strength and potential, his expression was rather ugly after being rejected in front of so many people. Huang, but I want it for myself. Li Qingshan returned to his room and took out a small bottle of alcohol, passing it to Huang Binghu. This is the medicinal alcohol my master left behind in the past. It might be able to cure your illness. You from Tian-ti-ti-ti-ti-ti-ti-ti. Li to-ti-ti-ti-ti-ti-ti-ti-ti. Li Qingshan smiled and said, there's no harm in trying. This was the spiritual wine brewed from the spiritual ginseng. Although he was not skilled in medicine, he had some understanding of Huang Binghu's illness. He had been born with a weak body, and his many years of practicing martial arts had exhausted his origin, so he had to rely on his inner strength to support himself. This was an incurable disease that even a divine doctor would find difficult to cure. This was a congenital defect that no one could cure. However, the spirit ginseng had an innate qi that could save his life. Huang Binghu drank the spiritual wine in one gulp, then sat down to meditate. After a short while, wisps of white qi emitted from the top of his head, and his originally sallow complexion regained its ruddiness. After a long time, he opened his eyes. "Chief Hunter, what do you think?" the hunters asked one after another. Huang Binghu touched his chest in disbelief. "I feel much better." It was not just much better, it was better than ever. It was as if he had returned to his youth. There was a burst of cheers, and many of the hunters shed tears. Many of the people who had originally been hostile towards Li Qingshan all changed their attitudes, holding his hands and thanking him profusely. Li Qingshan raised the stone-splitter bow. "Then it would be impolite of me to refuse this bow." Huang Binghu's expression darkened slightly. Then, "Qingshan, can we change the wager?" Having escaped from death, he was immediately reluctant to part with this old companion. "Don't even think about it." Li Qingshan refused firmly. "The words of a man of the mountains are like the mountains. How can I repent so easily?" "All right then." Huang Binghu's expression was bitter, which led to a burst of laughter from the people around him. Very rarely did they see their chief hunter act like this. "Qingshan, are you going to come back?" "I'm just going to Crouching Ox Village to take a look. There are still some things I haven't tidied up yet, and I want to find a quiet place to practice my martial arts and see if I can make a breakthrough." Over the past few days of drinking spiritual alcohol, Li Qingshan felt that he had already touched upon the crux of the ox demon's fist of great strength. He planned on cultivating alone and achieving the strength of an ox. By then, he would no longer have to remain trapped in the mountains and forests. He could go out and see the outside world. He remembered that the fatty he saved yesterday seemed to have called himself some Qingyang district magistrate. He wanted to fulfill his promise with Little Anne. Although he had no idea how far south Little and Pointed to was, he still had to take the first step. Another breakthrough? Huang Binghu had sensed long ago that the current Li Qingshan had changed again compared to a few days ago. His entire being had undergone a drastic change. This rate of improvement was basically shocking. Yet in the blink of an eye, he said he wanted to make another breakthrough. He could not help but think of how Li Qingshan had once said he wanted to become an innate master. Back then, he had only thought of it as a passing thought. Now, he suddenly felt that perhaps he really could achieve it. But what about the prey you've hunted? Li Qingshan's harvest over the past few days had almost caught up to the entire village's harvest. "I don't want anything else. I just want the tiger bones from that tiger. Also, I want you to collect some tiger bones for me. I want to make some medicinal alcohol. I'll buy them at market price." The reason why he chased after the tiger relentlessly was not just because he wanted to show off in the village. Instead, it was because Oxen had told him that once he achieved the strength of an ox with the ox demon's fist of great strength, he could begin practicing the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. He needed to use another type of medicinal alcohol. The most important ingredient was like ginseng, precious but not uncommon. It was tiger bones. Hunters and tigers were mortal enemies. A single hunter would be afraid of a vicious tiger, but once a tiger became too aggressive, they would definitely search the mountain on a large scale, setting up many traps. Wild beasts were vicious, but they were still no match for humans. The number of tiger bones accumulated in the Drawn Reins village was probably not small. Huang Binghu said, "Is this the prescription your master left behind?" "Yes." "Are you saying that just because you're generous, the men of my Drawn Reins village are petty? I can help you make the medicinal alcohol, but can you let us use those two prescriptions as well?" Huang Binghu secretly tried out Li Qingshan's prescription. The medicinal alcohol made was indeed much better than the medicinal alcohol used in the village. Furthermore, There was no need to buy the ingredients from outsiders. Their village could gather them all. If they used it to nurture their disciples, it would not take long for the strength of Drawn Rain's village to rise to another level. Li Qingshan had no objections. Those 2 prescriptions were just temporary items. There was nothing particularly precious about them, so there was no harm in giving them to others. Furthermore, he could save himself the trouble of making the medicinal alcohol. It was the best of both worlds. He handed the prescriptions to Huang Binghu, then took the stone-splitter bow, mounted oxen, and slowly left. It was only when Li Qingshan's figure disappeared around the corner of a mountain path that Grandpa Zong whispered to Huang Binghu, "Hunting chief, why didn't you stop him just now? The spiritual ginseng is most likely on him. The alcohol you drank was most likely made from the spiritual ginseng, and the spiritual ginseng is most likely in the gourd at his waist." Li Qingshan had never mentioned the matter of the spiritual ginseng, but in the eyes of this experienced old hunter, he had already revealed too many clues. To Huang Binghu, who had once walked the Jianghu, these things could only be seen and understood even more clearly. Huang Binghu gazed at the mountain path that Li Qingshan had disappeared into. After a long silence, he turned his head and said, "After all, we are different from those ginseng foragers, aren't we?" Chapter 32. Grandpa Zong also showed some respect. Many mountain villages were like Ginseng King Village, and hunter villages were even more so. After all, it was much easier to be a hunter than to hunt beasts. If they encountered a lone traveler, they could kill him with 1 arrow and take the item. It was simply too easy. Ever since Huang Binghu had led Drawn Rain's village, he had strictly restricted the villagers. This had never happened before. On the mountain path, Oxen said to Li Qingshan, "You gave that bottle of spiritual wine. At least 2 people have seen through the matter of the spiritual ginseng." Li Qingshan said, "I know. It's very possible that they will attack and make you stay in Drawn Rain's village forever. I know that too." Li Qingshan had lived 2 lives and was not a naive teenager. He knew of the many dark sides of human nature. "But I'm willing to take this risk. In life, if I'm always careful and don't believe in others or myself, then what's the point of mastering a peerless technique?" He had some measure of his own strength and was confident that even in the worst-case scenario, he would be able to kill his way out. Furthermore, he believed that his own strength would have the effect of intimidating others. On one hand, he warmly invites me while on the other, he silently presses on his sword. Does this count as becoming mature? Li Qingshan sighed in his heart as he caressed the locust wood tablet on his waist that had the 2 words Nanan carved on it. However, there were still people in the world that he could wholeheartedly trust. Ghosts. They slowly walked along the rugged mountain path. The red, yellow, and green maple trees were like fire along the way. It was very beautiful. Li Qingshan took out his bamboo flute again and began to play it. The clear sound of the flute echoed through the autumn mountains. "Still can't find it?" The young man who was called Young Master by the swordsman asked somewhat anxiously. He had already led people to search Bailaro Peak for many days and had even expanded the search area, but there was no sign of the spiritual ginseng. "Young Master, we've already brought people to flatten Ginseng King Village. The spiritual ginseng is definitely not there. They said that it must have been taken by Drawn Rain's village. Should we flatten Drawn Rain's village while we're at it?" A swordsman asked. They have great enmity with the Drawn Rain's village, so of course they would say that. They think I don't know that the Drawn Rain's village withdrew from the mountain on the day of the Mid-Autumn Festival, and then went to the north for the autumn hunt. Drawn Rain's village isn't like those country bumpkins from Ginseng King Village. Huang Binghu's archery skills were famous in Jianghu back then. Unless it's absolutely necessary, don't provoke him. No one in Jianghu dared to underestimate a strong bow or crossbow. Even a first-rate master would be at a disadvantage if the arrows were fired randomly. Young Master is wise. Looks like we can only wait until the next full moon. The young master felt a little proud. Suddenly, his ears twitched. What's that sound? It sounds like a flute. Siren. The closest villages to here are the Ginseng King and the Reigning Horse. Let's go take a look. Oxen suddenly stopped in his tracks. Li Qingshan also saw more than 10 silhouettes lightly stepping on the treetops and rocks as they flew over from afar. Each of them had a sword on their back, and their posture was incomparably elegant. "Is this light body technique?" Li Qingshan exclaimed. He immediately thought of the person Little and had mentioned and raised his guard. However, this place should be quite a distance away from Bailaro Peak. The young master was the first to arrive in front of Li Qingshan. His subordinates behind him loudly praised, "Young master has great light body technique." Li Qingshan saw that the young master had red lips, white teeth, and a handsome face. After being praised by his subordinates, his face was filled with an arrogant smile. Other than the calluses on his sword-wielding hands, he looked like a rich young master. He sized up the young master, but the young master didn't look at him. He glanced at him lightly and asked, "Are you from Drawn Rain's village?" Li Qingshan replied, "That's right. If not, then who are you? Who are you to ask for our young master's name?" A tall and skinny swordsman with a pale complexion saw that Li Qingshan was still sitting casually on the cow. His sword flashed, and he used Immortal Guides the way to stab towards his face. "Get down here." He wanted to scare him off the cow and make a fool of himself. Li Qingshan's face turned cold. He slightly tilted his body, and when the sword was about to reach its end, his eyes flashed. He quickly stretched out his hand and grabbed the blade of the sword. The tall and skinny swordsman coldly snorted in his heart, "You actually dare to grab my sword? This is a fine steel treasure sword given by my sect. I only need to turn the blade of the sword and I will chop off your hand." However, when he used his strength to turn the sword, not only did he not achieve his goal, he instead twisted the fine steel treasure sword like a fried dough twist. The blade of the sword remained unmoved in Li Qingshan's hand. Even with the strength of his arm, he couldn't even match the strength of a few of Li Qingshan's fingers. Li Qingshan was enraged. There was no grudge between them, yet they wanted him to be crippled for life. These people of the pugilistic world were too vicious. Bang! With a peng sound, the blade of the sword was broken. The tall and skinny swordsman's complexion turned pale. His sword was unexpectedly broken by an unknown brat. How could he endure this? He wanted to forcefully attack with his broken sword. The young master reprimanded him, "Kai Da, get down. You are not skilled enough. Don't embarrass our Dragon's Gate sword sect. Yes, this subordinate deserves to die. When we return, I will go to the disciplinary hall to receive my punishment." The tall and skinny swordsman named Kai Da did not dare to disobey. He retreated, but he looked at Li Qingshan with incomparable malice. The young master said with interest, "I did not expect to meet an external expert deep in the mountains. You are qualified to know this young master's name. Listen well, I am the Dragon's Gate sword sect's young Jun." Li Qingshan shook his head, "Never heard of you before. Country bumpkin, you are ignorant and inexperienced. The sword of our Dragon's Gate sword sect cannot be broken by others. I will not make things difficult for you. Leave behind a hand. Which hand do you want?" The rage in Li Qingshan's chest surged. He wished that he could kill young Jun with one strike. Originally, he thought that even if a person who practiced martial arts could not be chivalrous, he would still be somewhat cultured. From the looks of it, he was very wrong. The good and evil of human nature all depended on a single thought. When a person had the power to toy with the lives of others, how many people could maintain their so-called humanity, not taking and doing whatever they wanted? However, this group of people could not be compared to the ginseng foragers who practiced shallow martial arts. They were true practitioners of martial arts. The ox demon forges its hide could block fists, but it could not block fine steel swords infused with inner chi. Furthermore, they all possessed movement techniques. Even if they managed to escape, it would not be easy. Young Jun said, "Though, seeing how you're so young, your talent is quite good to be able to practice external martial arts to such a level. Crippling you like this is quite a pity. Why don't you become my servant?" This was his true objective, as most people who practiced external martial arts were straightforward and honest. They did not have as many thoughts as people who practiced internal martial arts. In other words, their muscles grew into their brains. As a result, Many masters of the Jianghu had powerful external martial artists as servants. He had always wanted to be cultured and recruit someone like that. When he saw Li Qingshan, he beamed inside. Wasn't this exactly what he was looking for? If he beat him up now, all he needed to do was give him some benefits in the future, and he would be able to raise a loyal dog. Young master, you mustn't. Kai Da tried to dissuade him in a hurry. If this kid really became the young master's servant, his status would rise. Yang Jun shot him a glance, and he immediately shut up. Another swordsman said, "Why don't you hurry up and agree? Our Dragon's Gate sword sect is renowned throughout Qingyang City. Even becoming a servant disciple is difficult. Now that the young master is promoting you, you'll reach the top in a single step. I, Li Qingshan, will not become anyone's servant." Li Qingshan emphasized each word. He came from a different world. He had the same love and hatred as the people of this world, but there was one thing that was different. He had no loyalty. He would not be loyal to anyone, no matter how benevolent, noble, or terrifyingly powerful the person was. Chapter 33. If it were a one-on-one battle, the current Li Qingshan was confident he could defeat or even kill Yang Jun within 10 moves. Page, you refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Yang Jun was just about to issue an order to capture Li Qingshan. Even if the Drawn Rains village was not to be trifled with, there was no need to worry about the news of him being destroyed in the depths of the mountains. Li Qingshan's body tensed up as well. He planned on capturing the ringleader first. He would deal with the blow and capture Yang Jun first. Suddenly, someone said, "Young master, he seems to be carrying the stone splitter bow on his back." What? The stone splitter bow? Yang Jun stopped and studied the great bow on Li Qingshan's back. He had some understanding towards the weapons of famed figures near Qingyang City. "Where did you get this bow from?" "The hunting chief obviously gave it to me," said Li Qingshan. Yang Jun's expression wavered. He had been influenced by what he saw and heard in the sect, so he knew everything he needed to know. The person who could obtain this weapon was probably Huang Binghu's successor, the next hunting chief of the Drawn Rains village. If someone like that died, the Drawn Rains village would never just let the matter rest. They would be able to find out about their activities in the region without any effort at all. If they really did everything they could for revenge, the hidden arrows and traps would be difficult to deal with. He could not provoke trouble like this over a moment of anger. He swung his hand. "Kid, don't let me run into you again." In the blink of an eye, they all vanished. Only Li Qingshan remained on the mountain path. He could not read minds, but he could guess that they feared the Drawn Rains village. When strangers saw you, they would never see you as a person. Instead, they would see your influence, power, and wealth. Li Qingshan had reached the level of a third-rate master, but he had relied on the bow on his back to escape danger. He was furious. He thought to himself, "If I don't get my revenge, I'm not human. I, Li Qingshan, will never allow anyone to bully me, nor will I rely on someone else's reputation to live." Originally, he didn't quite agree with Oxen's theory that a man should be more broad-minded. But now, he realized that a lot of deadly feuds were formed because of a single glare, and they wouldn't stop until one of them died. After over a month, Li Qingshan returned to Crouching Ox Village once again. Before he even stepped through the door, he heard something inside. "Is there a thief? It's also because I live in a remote place. I'd like to see which petty thief dares to steal from me." The anger in his heart had not yet subsided. He quickly walked in and grabbed the man. The man turned around in pain. Their eyes met, and both of them were stunned. "Li Fugue, Erlang. What are you doing in my house? Erlang, you're not dead." Li Qingshan looked at the room. Although it had been more than a month, it was still spotless. He knew that Li Fugue was not stealing, but helping him clean the room. "Of course I'm not dead. Why do you say that?" Only after asking around did he find out that Li Qingshan had returned from Cypress Stream Village without any news. Everyone in the village had seen him get into a conflict with the people of the Drawn Rains village at the market, so they all thought that he was done for. Li Fugue even helped him burn some joss paper and cried. Li Qingshan did not know whether to laugh or cry. I'm alive and well, aren't I? Hunter Huang of the Drawn Reins village invited me to the village as a guest, so I stayed for a while longer. Li Fugui never thought that he would actually be able to come out alive after entering a dangerous place like the Drawn Reins village. As for the fact that Hunter Huang had invited him over as a guest, he did not really believe it. In his eyes, although Li Qingshan was powerful, he was still nowhere close to someone like Huang Binghu. He did not know what to say either. He only muttered, "That's good. That's good." It did make Li Qingshan feel rather touched. He had not helped the wrong person back then. However, Li Fugui's expression suddenly became worried. "You should leave quickly. Don't let the villagers know." "What now?" "The eldest son of the village head's family has returned. He says he wants to make trouble for you." Li Long, village head Li's eldest son, as well as Li Qingshan and Li Bao's elder brother. The name was not unfamiliar to Li Qingshan. Instead, the villagers had almost grown calluses from hearing it. Originally, Li Long was only a few years older than him. However, it was said that when he was playing outside when he was young, he caught the eye of a noble and was taken to Qingyang City to learn martial arts. He would only return home during festivals and festivals. He had seen Li Qingshan, the cowherd, a few times, but he had never even spoken to him. In the eyes of the villagers, he was an important figure who had emerged from the Crouching Ox village and arrived in Qingyang City. He had made a name for himself. Every single family had a daughter, and they all hoped to marry her off to him. Together with Caretaker Liu's son, Little Caretaker Liu, they were known as the two talents of the Crouching Ox. Of course, with the sudden rise of Li Qingshan, perhaps they should be known as the three talents of the Crouching Ox. However, Li Qingshan had never seen the world. He had never set foot in Qingyang City, so it was rather difficult for him to become the third talent. Li Qingshan said, "You think I'm afraid of him?" Not only was he not afraid, but he even wanted to see for himself. He ignored Li Fugui's advice and made his way to village head Li's home. In village head Li's home, a young man with a buzz cut lectured village head Li, "Just anyone is bold enough to bully us. You really are regressing the more you live." Then he pointed at Li Hu and Li Bao. "You two are grown men, yet you allow him to bully you all the way to your doorstep." He had basically grown up in Qingyang City, so his horizons and experience were extremely abundant. He had already begun to treat himself as a Qingyang citizen. Right now, he viewed the matters of the village from the perspective of a city dweller. He felt a natural sense of disdain, not just towards Li Qingshan, but towards everything in the Crouching Ox village. He was not young, but he had never married. His family had once tried to find a partner for him in a hurry, but he rejected all of them. Right now, he was no longer someone that village girls could match. Village head Li, who was awe-inspiring in the village, only said meekly, "Don't be angry, my son. He's already dead anyway. He's seeking his own death by provoking the Drawn Reins village. There's no need for me to go through the trouble of teaching him a lesson." Li Hu shrunk his neck in meekly, but Li Bao said, "Big brother, you won't let us join the Iron Fist and learn martial arts, so of course we'll be bullied in the village." Li Long shot a glance at him. "That's because you don't have enough talent. Li Qingshan's not dead. Li Qingshan's back." At this moment, someone suddenly called out from outside. Li Long suddenly stood up. If this news only kicked up a commotion in the peaceful village, then Li Qingshan has gone to village head Li's home, would kick up a great commotion, drawing the entire village to move out once more. They wanted to see the battle between the first and third prodigies of the Crouching Ox village. Under the scorching sun, Li Qingshan and Li Long stared at each other. The villagers all held their breaths, as if they were afraid of startling them. Li Hu and Li Bao stood beside Li Long, boosting his momentum. Li Long waved his hand, dismissing the two of them. "Li Erlang, it's been so long. You've grown so big already." This was completely the tone of a senior speaking to a junior. However, the villagers all believed he had the right to speak like that, so they discussed quietly. "Erlang's in big trouble now." "Yeah. Li Long can't be compared to patch-haired Liu and those scoundrels." Chapter 34. Even though Huang Binghu had a sickly body, The feeling he gave off was that of a tiger's bones standing tall and mighty. He was extremely dangerous. Furthermore, in their last exchange, Huang Binghu had made a tactical error. He wanted to fight him head-on, using his weakest point to attack his strongest point. Of course, he would not have won. Otherwise, even if he did not use archery, as long as he had a weapon in his hand, he would not have been able to defeat him. Li Long said, "I heard you wanted to see me." Li Long also had a good eye and thought, this Li Erlang's posture is calm and steady. One look and you can tell he's trained in martial arts. He doesn't seem like a normal brute, and his aura seems to be a bit like Master's. He immediately shook his head, finding this thought funny. What kind of person was his master? How could he be mentioned in the same breath as this kind of brat? You dared to humiliate my family when I wasn't home. You really don't know how the word death is written. Oh, then I'd like to learn. Before Li Qingshan finished speaking, Li Long gave a loud roar and rushed forward to attack. With a metal tree piercing the clouds, he attacked Li Qingshan's chest. Cries of alarm came from all around. Li Fugui called out, "Erlang, be careful." Li Qingshan's body did not move. It was unknown if he could not dodge or if he was stunned. Li Long felt disdain in his heart. So he was just pretending. Just now, it seems I've misjudged him. With a muffled bang, the fist landed on Li Qingshan's body. Li Qingshan used the ox demon stomps the ground, his 2 feet seemingly rooted to the ground. He did not move at all. Seeing that we're from the same hometown, I'll let you have 3 punches. Li Long was stunned. Although he had only used 30% of his strength in this punch, there was no one in the same sect who dared to take it head-on. Now that it had been taken by an unknown brat, he was even more furious when he heard Li Qingshan's words. He actually dared to be so careless. In the blink of an eye, he sent out a second punch, using 70% of his strength. He thought, don't blame me for not showing mercy this time. His fist carried a fierce gust of wind as it landed on Li Qingshan's body. Li Qingshan shuddered and said, "You haven't used your full strength yet. Hurry up, this is the last move." Li Long stared at Li Qingshan as if he had seen a ghost, but he did not believe it. With a loud shout, he exerted all the power in his body, the muscles and tendons on his arms bulged, and suddenly they became a fist bigger, faintly revealing a greenish-black color, like black iron. In normal fights, even if it was a life and death struggle, he wouldn't dare to do this. He was afraid that he would use too many moves and expose his flaws. But now, he couldn't care less. He used all his strength to throw out his strongest and most ferocious punch. After taking the punch head-on, Li Qingshan's body swayed, and he finally took a step back. His face turned red, and the blood in his body surged. This punch still has some strength. 3 punches have passed. Now it's my turn. He raised his hand and punched. Iron chain crossing the river. The wind from the punch hit him in the face, and Li Long turned pale with fright. He crossed his arms, and used the strongest defensive move of the iron fist. Immediately after, he felt as if he had been hit by a raging bull. The iron bridge was washed away by the torrential flood, and his body flew out involuntarily. Even when he fell to the ground, he still couldn't believe it. I actually lost in 1 move. How could he have such great strength? Second punch. A black shadow suddenly blocked the sunlight, and shrouded his eyes. Li Qingshan was already in front of him. Li Long wanted to block, but his arms were in so much pain that he couldn't lift them. Li Qingshan's punch came from above, and landed on Li Long's stomach like a pile driver. Li Long instantly arched up like a shrimp, and spat out a mouthful of acid. Third punch. It went straight for Li Long's face. The villagers cried out in alarm. They were stunned by this sudden turn of events. The number 1 hero of the village, Li Long, whom they had been talking about for many years, was actually defeated in an instant. Moreover, he was defeated so thoroughly. The 2 brothers, Li Hu and Li Bao, couldn't believe that their big brother, whom they had always admired, was actually so vulnerable. Village chief Li shouted at the top of his lungs, "Show mercy." The wind from the punch hit his face, but there was no sharp pain. Li Long slowly opened his eyes, only to see Li Qingshan's fist firmly stopping on his head. Only then did he realize that his whole body was covered in cold sweat. Just now, at that moment, he felt as if he was facing his invincible master, and he could only close his eyes and wait for death. Village Chief Li threw himself at Li Qingshan, and his skinny hand tightly grabbed his arm. Erlang, for the sake of your dead parents, let my Xiaolong go. Dad, go away, let him come at me. Li Long struggled to get up. Li Qingshan said, seeing that you are somewhat filial, I will remember this punch. He was quite satisfied with the few punches he had just now, not because he was proud of his strength, but because of his strategy. Li Long had practiced martial arts for more than 10 years, and it was not in vain. His combat experience was above Li Qingshan's. If they really fought, the other party would not fight him head-on, and it would take a lot of effort to win. Therefore, he simply let him punch 3 times. Defending against such punches was what he was best at. Wherever Li Long's punches hit, he would focus his mind there, and the true qi in his body would also circulate there. After Li Long's 3 punches, not only was his mind injured, but his physical strength was also at its lowest. If he could not dodge, he could only block Li Qingshan's punches, and the result would be the same as just now. Li Long stood up with the help of Li Hu and Li Bao. Are you really Li Erlang? That's impossible. He only had a very vague impression of Li Qingshan. Other than his somewhat eccentric personality, he was not an important person. Even according to his father's description, Li Qingshan was just a hot-blooded youth who was forced to suddenly burst out with ruthlessness. This kind of thing was not rare to him, but he never knew that he had such martial arts. It was as if a child in the mountains had gone out to work hard for many years and finally earned a family business. After achieving success and fame, he returned to his hometown in glory and enjoyed the worship of the villagers. But suddenly, an inconspicuous country boy appeared and was even richer than him. The disappointment in his heart could not be any greater, and after the disappointment came anger. I am not Li Erlang, I am Li Qingshan. Since he no longer recognized that big brother, then Li Qingshan was not willing to be some Erlang. Li Long said fiercely, then do you know who I am? Of course I know. Then do you know who my master is? Who? Obviously the master of Qingyang City's Iron Fist, known as the Iron Lion in the Jianghu, old hero Liu. Caretaker Liu suddenly stood out from the crowd and said with an extremely high and respectful tone. Li Qingshan frowned. I've never heard of him. What Iron Fist? Old hero Liu? They all sounded like third-rate goods, but he had forgotten that he himself was third-rate. How ignorant. You haven't even heard of my master's name. Looks like you haven't heard of the 4 great masters of Qingyang, the dragon, the tiger, the lion, and the bear. Li Long called out. Don't tell me the dragon in there is you. Li Qingshan widened his eyes. This was the second time he had been accused of being ignorant today. All he knew was that in the wuxia novels of his past life, people who used animals as nicknames were all trash. Jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards were all useless. Only true masters who used directions as nicknames were nicknames, such as Eastern Heretic, Western Venom, Southern Emperor, and Northern Beggar. Of course not. Li Long almost laughed out of anger. In the government office of Qingyang City, the advisor held a small booklet and introduced the fat official one by one. Sir, apart from these local aristocrats and landlords, there are 4 other places and 4 people that you can't offend. The fat official said in irritation, I might as well not offend a single person in the entire Qingyang City. The advisor ignored his feelings. These 4 places are a sect, a village, and a stronghold. What do you mean by a sect, a village, and a stronghold? The sect is the Iron Fist, the sect is the Dragon's Gate sect, the village is the Drawn Reins village, and the stronghold is the Blackwind stronghold. The dragon, the tiger, the lion, and the bear are the leaders of these places. Sir, if you offend these aristocrats, you'll be chased out of Qingyang City at most and lose your position as district magistrate. However, if you offend them, you might lose your life for no reason. Chapter 35. As it turned out, the group of people on the mountain path today was sent by the Dragon's Gate. The arrogant guy was the young master of the Dragon's Gate. No wonder he was so arrogant and despotic. Li Long said in surprise, You know, sickly tiger. Afterwards, he naturally saw the bow on Li Qingshan's back. As Huang Binghu rarely visited Qingyang City, he could not be certain that it was the stone splitter bow. Li Qingshan nodded and said nothing more. Li Long said, "Don't tell me your martial arts are also his. No, and it's none of your business. If you want revenge, feel free to come." Li Qingshan did not want to use Huang Binghu's name to intimidate others. Li Long's expression changed. He thought, this Li Qingshan's martial arts are already third-rate, so just what kind of person is his master? And he's connected to Huang Binghu. I only have a small dispute with him. Even if I kill him, what benefit will I get? It's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Li Long made up his mind. Suddenly, his expression changed. He smiled slightly, although his smile was rather forced. Erlang, we're fellow villagers, so what kind of grievance is there for revenge? Li Qingshan was taken aback instead. Originally, he thought what would happen next would be him provoking the elders after beating up the young, forcing him into a corner like a swarm of bees. Afterwards, he would achieve a minor accomplishment in his abilities and kill them all. He never thought Li Long would actually be so fickle despite how reckless he seemed. Moreover, he was quite thick-skinned as well, actually changing his tune. He had basically witnessed the slippery side of the people of the Jianghu. Li Long smiled. And exchanging 3 punches for 2 punches, so I've profited. I can let you earn some more. Li Qingshan could tell that he originally wanted revenge. He had only changed his mind after hearing Huang Binghu's name. When he thought about how this was the second time he had to escape trouble like this today, he felt very mixed emotions. He hoped that one day, he could also be like Huang Binghu. No, he wanted to be even stronger than Huang Binghu. Even if it was 1,000 miles away, if someone heard his name, they would still feel deep veneration, not daring to act recklessly. Li Long smiled awkwardly. There's no need for that. Don't just stand there. Let's talk inside. Our Crouching Ox village has produced such a young hero. I just happened to want to get to know him better. Then, he cupped his fists in all directions. Fellow villagers, please go ahead. If I have the time, Li Long will visit each and every one of you. The villagers looked at one another. The outcome had truly exceeded their expectations, but since Li Long had asked them to leave, they dared not disobey. They just silently passed the title of the greatest hero of the Crouching Ox village to Li Qingshan. Since he had lowered himself so much, it was difficult for Li Qingshan to turn him down. Just like he had said, there was no particularly great grievance between them, and he also wanted to understand some information about Qingyang City, especially the Dragon's Gate sect. Under many gazes of respect, Li Qingshan was invited into village head Li's home. He was completely different from the nervousness he felt when he attended the banquet at caretaker Liu's home. He was relaxed and light-hearted. In the eyes of others, he possessed an air of arrogance. This was the change in mentality and bearing that came from his own strength. Qingshan, with how impressive your martial arts are you interested in finding a job in Qingyang City? Our Iron Fist sincerely invites all the heroes of the world to gather. With your martial arts, my master will definitely like you. Li Long tried to rope him in right from the beginning. I'm skilled in martial arts. Can I join the Iron Fist just because I want to? Li Qingshan found this person's breadth of mind rather admirable, but little did he know that Li Long was conflicted inside. Although Li Qingshan had punched him twice, there was no great grievance between them. If he could rope him into the gang, he would be able to help each other out as fellow villagers, which would be beneficial to his status in the sect. Of course I need to be vouched for. Don't worry, I can vouch for you. Our Iron Fist is a great clan with a great business. Our influence is not limited to Qingyang City. Our headquarters is located in the Clear River Prefecture. As long as your fists are tough enough and your contributions are great enough, you won't have to worry about development. Women and silver will be at your fingertips too. Li Hu and Li Bao were both extremely envious. They could only blame their elder brother for not vouching for them, preventing them from enjoying the women and silver in the city. Yeah. My family's Liu Neng is a caretaker in old hero Liu's estate. He'll be able to look after you when the time comes. Caretaker Liu followed them in as well. He felt fortunate that he had not offended Li Qingshan too much in the past. Who would have thought that the cowherd from back then would become so powerful in just a few months? As Li Long said that, Li Qingshan gradually understood that although the Iron Fist accepted disciples, it was more like a gang, entrenched in the city. The Iron Lion, old hero Liu, should be a branch leader or a branch sect master. Li Qingshan said, "May I ask what rate old hero Liu's martial arts are in the Jianghu? If you ask someone else, they really might not be able to answer you. My master's Iron Fist has reached perfection. He can be described as a second-rate master. Then how do I compare to him?" This. Li Long never thought Li Qingshan would compare him to the peak of Qingyang right off the bat, and he was even comparing him to his master. He became rather displeased. "I'm not trying to boast, but while your martial arts are impressive, you're only at the peak of the third rate. You're nowhere near my master's opponent. Then what's the difference between second rate and third rate? My master once said that a person who has just grasped the rudiments of martial arts can take on 3 to 5 strong men. An expert of the Jianghu can take on 3 to 5 such people, and so on and so forth. Although it's not absolutely accurate, that's the general idea. Once it exceeds this number, it'll be difficult for 2 fists to take on 4 hands. However, this is only in terms of direct confrontation. If you use the method of sneak attacks, a first-rate expert who is proficient in Qinggong can kill dozens of second-rate experts. However, dozens of trained ordinary archers can also kill first-rate experts. Li Qingshan roughly understood his strength. Those ginseng foragers were originally people who had practiced martial arts. Back then, he could be regarded as an expert of the Jianghu, so although he won, it was a Pyrrhic victory. After some cultivation, he barely managed to reach the level of a third-rate master. Only after drinking the spiritual alcohol did he become a true third-rate master. Li Long's martial arts could be regarded as decent, but he was not a master. As a result, he was not his opponent at all. "Apologies. I've already promised hunting Chief Huang of the Drawn Rains village that I'll join them. I'm afraid I can't accept your invitation." He could not help but think of a few months ago, when he could not even sleep peacefully in the cowshed. His brother and sister-in-law viewed him as a thorn in their side, wanting to chase him out no matter what. Yet now, people were inviting him everywhere. As expected, Li Long thought. He said in pity, "The Drawn Rains village doesn't have much to offer. Out of the 4 places in Qingyang, our Iron Fist is the most at ease. They're all in the mountains, so how can they compare to us, who are so close to the bustling world? Whatever. Whenever you change your mind and come to Qingyang City, feel free to come to Iron Fist to find me. Just mention my name." Li Qingshan could not help but smile. Sure enough, there were not a lot of people who wandered the Jianghu for the sake of justice. He asked about many more things, and Li Long answered everything he knew. Seeing how he was so loyal, Li Qingshan was not a tactless person, so he showed some respect. "Brother Li, it's not a festival right now, so why have you returned?" Li Long suddenly lowered his voice. "Even if you didn't ask, I'd tell you anyway. I've returned this time for something major that threatens the Crouching Ox village. The Black Wind stronghold might treat the Crouching Ox village as a target to plunder." Chapter 36. Steward Liu stammered, "No. I don't think so. The Black Wind stronghold is very far from here. They've never been here before." He was the largest household in the village, so he was the first person the Black Wind stronghold came to look for. "I heard that the villages closer to the Black Wind stronghold have strengthened their defenses and built walls. That's why the bandits are so far away. It's almost winter, so they need to store food to get through the winter. Steward Liu, your granaries are all full, right? Don't tell me the government doesn't care." Only now did Li Qingshan learn that the mountain bandits also had an autumn hunt. For hunters, autumn was when the wild beasts were fat, but for the bandits, it was when the commoners who had just reaped the fruits of their labor were at their fattest. The government collects money every year, saying that they want to suppress the bandits, but they never do anything. Steward Liu said, Then what should we do? Nephew, why didn't you bring more people back?" Li Long glanced at him in annoyance. He was also willing to bring more people back, but he was only one of the sect master's disciples, not the leader of the Iron Fist. It was fine for his brothers to eat and drink with him, but it was impossible for them to fight the bandits of the Black Wind stronghold. However, it was all thanks to Steward Liu that he was able to become the Iron Lion's disciple. Because of this old friendship, it was not appropriate for him to reprimand him. He only said, "I alone am enough. This time, it definitely won't be the leader of the Black Wind stronghold himself. It's most likely one of the leaders. As long as I mention my master's name, he'll have to give me some face. However, I'll also need some people to keep up appearances." Qingshan. Li Long looked at Li Qingshan expectantly. With such an expert by his side, he felt a bit more confident. Li Qingshan deeply doubted this explanation. How could someone who had come all the way here just retreat after hearing his name? However, he would not let this small village that had raised him be trampled by others. He cupped his fists and said, "It's my duty." With his promise, Li Long also calmed down. With the help of a third-rate expert, this matter would be much more assured. This was also the key reason why he was willing to tolerate Li Qingshan to this extent. Village Chief Li and Steward Liu arranged for some workers and servants to make preparations. They also equipped some weapons. Although the news was still sealed, the atmosphere immediately became tense. Steward Liu said with a trembling voice, "Nephew, should we go into hiding?" Li Long said, "There's no need to avoid this. They're here to plunder. They won't commit murder or arson for no reason. But Steward Liu, I'm afraid you'll have to bleed a little this time." Steward Liu let out a long sigh. If it was a blessing, it wouldn't be a misfortune. If it was a misfortune, it couldn't be avoided. He could leave, but his family business couldn't. They waited quietly in the room. The two brothers, Li Hu and Li Bao, were still sweating from fright as they held their weapons. They constantly thought of the various terrifying rumors regarding the Black Wind Mountain. Li Long glanced at his brothers before glancing at Li Qingshan, who remained unfazed and resting with his eyes closed. He sighed inside. "If you had even half his courage, I'd be willing to take you into Qingyang City." Clang, clang, clang. Before the sky had even darkened, a gong suddenly rang out from outside the village. It was a scout stationed outside the village, a clever and nimble junior chosen by Steward Liu. "They are here," Li Long said. Li Qingshan snapped open his eyes. How bold of these bandits to actually plunder in broad daylight. The gong suddenly stopped. They hurried to the entrance of the village and saw a cloud of dust approaching from afar. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived before them. There were several dozen people. Whether they were tall or short, fat or skinny, they all had vicious expressions. The person in the lead rode a pony that could travel on mountain roads. He actually held a bloody head in his hand. "Xiao Liu," Steward Liu called out. The head belonged to the junior he had sent out to investigate, but it had actually been killed just like that. He became so frightened that his stomach and legs weakened. He looked at Li Long. "Didn't you say they wouldn't kill people for no reason?" Li Long's eyebrows furrowed. He said softly, "They're trying to kill to establish their might." Afterwards, he clasped his fist and said loudly, "I'm Li Long of the Iron Fist. May I ask which boss of the Black Wind stronghold has come? This is our third boss. If you're sensible, hand over your money and food. Don't make us waste our time, or we'll burn down your shitty village." A bandit called out, and the other bandits followed suit. They fiddled around with the weapons in their hands as they smiled scornfully. It was like they were looking at a group of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The third boss had a full beard and a fierce-looking face. He tossed the head to the ground and it rolled to Li Long's feet. "Iron Fist, if the Iron Lion was here, I'd leave immediately without another word. Who do you think you are?" When Li Hu and Li Bao saw the cloud of dust, they were so frightened that their faces turned ashen. Their legs trembled, and at this moment, they even weakened and fell to the ground. The bandits laughed loudly. "The third boss is so impressive." Li Long's expression changed and he gasped. It was rumored that out of all the bosses of the Black Wind stronghold, the third boss was the most savage and temperamental. He would plunder and plunder without hesitation. In the eyes of the villagers near the stronghold, he was someone even more terrifying than the master of the Blackwind stronghold. However, since the third boss had asked him what he was, it proved that he was still fearful of the Iron Fist and asked about his relationship with the Iron Lion. The situation was out of his control, so he could only hold back his anger. "I'm Master's final disciple. I knew you were coming, so I didn't want you to return empty-handed. I've given you a small gift, so please spare the Crouching Ox village for my master's sake." Caretaker Liu offered up an embroidered box with trembling hands. The third boss lashed out with his horsewhip, and the embroidered box flew into his hands, demonstrating his impressive martial arts. He opened the box, and it was filled with shiny silver. However, his face gradually darkened instead. 100 taels? Are you trying to send off a beggar? Be great king, we've already done our best. Before nightfall, I want to see 1,000 taels of silver and 1,000 catties of rations. Otherwise, HMPH. When the third boss reached there, he suddenly licked his lips and smiled obscenely. "My brothers also want to borrow a few women. Don't worry, we're not robbing them, we're just borrowing them. Once we're done, we'll return them to you next spring." The bandits all laughed obscenely. "Any woman that can become the wife of our third boss would be lucky. When spring comes, perhaps that woman won't even want to return." Li Long knew the best. No woman could return from the Blackwind stronghold. They had all been raped to death. He said loudly, "Does the third boss really not care about the Iron Fist at all?" Caretaker Liu was even more stunned by this number. He was stunned speechless. "Don't make me wait too long." The third boss did not even look at Li Long. He turned his head and ordered his subordinates, "Hurry them up." The 20 or so bandits laughed as they walked around Li Long's group. They entered the village and knocked on every door. If anyone dared to open the door, they would break it down. Hundreds of villagers were chased out like sheep. They gathered together in fear. The barking of dogs and the wailing of women and children filled the air. The third boss laughed as he looked at this scene. "Let's rest in this village tonight. This child is only 14 years old. He hasn't done anything bad in his life." Suddenly, an extremely calm voice sounded. It was so calm that it did not seem suitable for the current situation. However, within that calmness, there seemed to be an uncontrollable killing intent suppressed. Li Qingshan picked up Little Six's head from the ground and gently closed his eyes. The third boss narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" He did not notice Li Qingshan. From the beginning, when the head was thrown, Li Qingshan's head was lowered and his body was trembling. He thought that it was fear. However, Li Qingshan was no longer trembling. He slowly said, "This is a very good and clever child. His parents also love him very much." The third boss yawned. "What are you trying to say?" Chapter 37. The bandits roared with laughter, as if they had heard a hilarious joke. However, the third boss sensed something terrifying from Li Qingshan's body and didn't laugh out loud. The head fell to the ground and the bowstring was fully drawn. "Die!" Li Qingshan attacked in an instant. His angry roar couldn't drown out the sound of the bowstring, and the arrow shot towards the third boss with his monstrous rage. A black light shot through the air, and the enormous force sent the third boss flying high into the air before he fell heavily to the ground. The power of the three-stone bow was astonishing, and Li Qingshan's movements were smooth. At such a close distance, only a second-rate expert or higher would be able to dodge it, but the third boss was clearly not one of them. The noisy village instantly quieted down. The bandits all stared with wide eyes, unable to believe this scene. The grand third boss had actually been killed by a teenager. The villagers looked at him as if he were a god. To them, the bandits were terrifying demons, and the third boss was the leader of these demons. Now that Li Qingshan had killed the third boss with one strike, he was like a god. The situation had reversed, but there was no joy on Li Long's face, only fear. "Third boss! Third boss!" A few bandits surrounded the third boss, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. With a fierce expression, he pointed at Li Qingshan and said, "Kill him." He could be considered a third-rate expert, so he reacted in an instant. Although he couldn't dodge the arrow, he avoided a vital point. The arrow pierced through his right shoulder, shattering all the bones nearby. His right hand could be considered crippled. His eyes were bloodshot, and he wanted nothing more than to skin Li Qingshan alive. The bandits reacted and picked up their swords, and halberds, roaring as they charged at Li Qingshan. A gust of wind blew behind his head as a short javelin stabbed towards the back of his head. Without turning his head, he slightly tilted his head and grabbed the javelin. He turned around and threw it. The javelin shot back with 10 times its original speed, nailing the attacking bandit to the door. A halberd, a goose-feather saber, and a red-tasseled spear all stabbed towards him at the same time. Li Qingshan grabbed the shaft of the spear and pulled hard. The two bandits lost their balance and fell towards him in fright. A pair of iron arms were already waiting for them and struck their chests like iron hammers. Muffled sounds were heard and the two bandits were sent flying while vomiting blood. Seizing this opportunity, the Yangling saber stabbed into Li Qingshan's chest. The ice-cold saber and sword touched his lower abdomen. It looked like the saber was about to pierce through Li Qingshan's body, but it was unable to move even an inch further. Li Qingshan's pair of iron palms struck the bandit's head with the force of 2 piercing winds. When he put down his hands, the bandit collapsed to the ground as if he had lost his soul. Blood slowly seeped out of his 7 orifices. He strode towards the third leader, but the battle cries behind him were already deafening. With a flick of his toes, he hooked the halberd and held it in his hand. There was no technique, no apprehension, just a sweep. The strong wind stirred up a semicircle of dust and rushed towards the mountain bandits. The tip of the halberd broke and flew up, piercing the ground. Several weapons flew up, followed by a series of blood-curdling screams. Some people tried to block, but they couldn't block the sweeping force of the halberd. Smoke and dust scattered in all directions. 4 bandits fell to the ground. Only a short bandit was swept across the face and died on the spot. The other 3 bandits all had their chests cut open and were screaming on the ground. Fresh blood sprayed on the ground as if it was worthless, and the rich color flowed everywhere. Li Qingshan glanced at the broken halberd and muttered, "What a poor weapon." He threw it to the ground. But he didn't know how many hard bones and steel he had forcibly swept through in that instant. How could a normal weapon withstand such an attack? In the blink of an eye, 8 bandits were dead or seriously injured. The bandits behind them screamed in fear and stopped. They held their weapons and didn't dare to move forward. They were stunned by this tragic scene. The originally ordinary youth seemed to have turned into a terrifying killing god in a flash. Li Qingshan continued to walk towards the third boss. His face was expressionless, but his eyes flickered with a red light that even he himself didn't notice. However, his mind was rapidly analyzing the situation. He didn't let his anger get to his head. Only the third boss could be considered a third-rate master here, so he heavily injured him as soon as he attacked, eliminating the greatest threat. There were a few masters among the other bandits, but most of them were at the level of the ginseng foragers. They had only practiced some martial arts and were enough to bully commoners, but they were definitely not his opponent. I'm going to die here. The third boss propped himself up and moved backwards. He gazed at the approaching Li Qingshan in fear. He was like a humanoid demon from legends who would suddenly transform and bare his vicious fangs. No matter how many people were around him, they were unable to protect his safety. If I die, the entire Crouching Ox village will die with me. Do you know who my eldest brother is? Li Long's expression became even uglier. He went up and grabbed Li Qingshan. Qingshan, don't be rash. The third boss took the opportunity to climb onto his horse. He pulled on the reins and the horse galloped away. The other bandits didn't need him to say anything. They all followed him like a swarm of bees. They didn't even care about the injured bandits. Li Qingshan broke free from his restraints and grabbed Li Long's throat tightly. He lifted him up. Do you want to die too? Li Long said with difficulty, I can't kill the boss of the Black Wind stronghold. Have you heard of Elm Village? Elm Village. Caretaker Liu, who had collapsed on the ground and was scared half to death, suddenly cried out involuntarily. What Elm Village? Li Qingshan relaxed his grip. The people of Elm Village have always practiced martial arts. They're fierce and fierce. They once killed a boss of the Black Wind stronghold. However, not long after, the master of the Black Wind stronghold personally led 5 bosses and slaughtered over 100 people in the village, regardless of age or gender. They piled them up into a mountain of corpses. The master of the Black Wind stronghold personally led the bosses to offer sacrifices to their fallen brothers. Do you want something as tragic as that to happen in Crouching Ox Village? Then are we just going to let them trample over and humiliate us? Li Qingshan growled. Qingshan, I know how you feel, but the situation is stronger than you. Then let me become even stronger. The expressions of all the villagers changed. At this moment, they heard the third boss leave behind an extremely vicious sentence from afar. Your Crouching Ox Village will be massacred. Some people fell to the ground in fright. Cries and wails rang out again. There was no joy from repelling the bandits at all. An injured bandit clutched his chest as he smiled cruelly. You'll all be buried with me. Are you done? Li Qingshan said. What? Li Qingshan released Li Long and kicked the goosefeather blade beside his feet. The blade pierced the bandit's throat, and he immediately breathed his last. I won't go back on my words. Li Qingshan finished off the other injured bandits one by one. He turned around and said to the villagers, nothing will happen. I promise. Afterwards, he strode off in the direction the bandits had fled in without even looking back. The sun set in the west, and the last ray of light vanished from the horizon. Darkness descended on the mountains and land. Beside the roaring bonfire, 2 bandits helped the third boss pull out the arrow. The third boss cried out in pain and slapped one of the bandits away. Can't you be a little more fucking gentle? The bandit's mouth was covered in blood from the slap. He stuttered, afraid to talk back. The other bandits were all dejected. Under the Black Wind stronghold's fame, it had already been a very long time since they had experienced a defeat like this. They had already grown used to gazes of fear and flattery, and they were used to taking silver and women as they pleased. All of you, buck up. We'll definitely get our revenge. Once we capture that brat. The third boss smiled cruelly. Cut him into 1,000 pieces. Immediately, another bandit agreed. Chapter 38. Who did it? Who did it? The third boss roared. Although he was injured, he still had his cultivation. Just who was it that could actually kill someone under the watchful eyes of so many bandits? Another bandit's throat was slit and he fell to the ground. Just now, he was the first to agree with third boss that he wanted to cut Li Qingshan into 1,000 pieces. The dark forest seemed to hide a terrifying demon. A terrifying shadow instantly enveloped all the bandits. No one could see who did it. How did it happen? They didn't know if they would be the next to die. The fear of the unknown was the scariest. In the chaos, the third and fourth bandits fell to the ground. It was as if the scythe of the Grim Reaper was silently harvesting lives. The night wind was cold. An exquisite hunting knife, like a venomous snake, slithered through the tall withered grass. The blade was covered with dark grass juice, so it didn't reflect any light. Tonight, there was no moon. Li Qingshan stood in the dark forest on the hillside, watching everything. Only he could see Little and holding the hunting knife, pacing back and forth among the bandits. His face was filled with anger. The words of these bandits had completely enraged him. His numb and withered heart for a long time burst forth with such strong emotions for the first time. He wanted to kill all these people. Li Qingshan saw that Little and tried to get close to third boss several times, but was blocked. The blood energy of a third-rate master was already extremely strong, and could already restrain yin ghosts. The reason why Little and could get close to him was because he used his own life energy to nourish him every day. Ah! 2 screams were heard, 2 more bandits died. The third boss was not a useless person, he shouted, everyone gather together, stick together. All the bandits gathered around him to ensure his safety. The blood energy and life energy gathered together like a huge flame. Even Little and couldn't get close. Li Qingshan drank a mouthful of the spiritual wine in the gourd. Demon Ox's fist of great strength wasn't known for speed, nor did it have any so-called qinggong. He relied on the endurance of an ox and the replenishment of the spiritual wine to catch up. He replenished his vitality and raised the stone-splitter bow. Now, it's my turn to make a move. Peng. The pitch-black night sky was startled. Just from the sound alone, one could tell that it was an extremely powerful bowstring. The sound was short and elegant, carrying with it a sharp force that could cut through the air. The arrow whistled through the darkness in the distance, piercing through the chest of a bandit and nailing into the body of the bandit behind him. Killing two birds with one stone. The moment he heard the twang of the bowstring, the bandit had already been pierced. The bandits had been through quite a few battles, yet none of them could react in time. The third boss knew that this was because the arrow was faster than sound. The person who shot it was an expert. In all of Qingyang, there seemed to be only a single person who could shoot an arrow like that with a single bow. No, it's not that person. Otherwise, he would be dead by now. The third boss glanced at his injured right shoulder and remembered the brat who had forced him into this situation. Originally, he thought he had been careless, which was why he had fallen for the sneak attack. He never thought the brat's archery would be so terrifying. In reality, Li Qingshan's archery was not particularly accurate. Moreover, he had suddenly used a heavy bow like the stone-splitter bow from such a great distance. However, the bandits were all gathered together, so there was no need for him to take aim. All he had to do was shoot at the center, and there was no reason for him to miss. Third boss, it's that brat from before. He's caught up. He's trying to kill us all. The arrow came from that direction. Let's fight it out with him. No, we can't. Once we separate, as they argued, the second arrow pierced the chest of another bandit. Every single bandit's face twisted in fear. They were so flustered that they were like a group of lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The third boss ordered, "It's all that brat's doing. Let's charge up and kill him together." He led the bandits as they charged up the hill, yelling and shouting. Li Qingshan stood where he was without any hesitation, shooting arrow after arrow. An arrow shot out from the taut bowstring, whistling through the darkness. It pierced through 3 withered leaves as it spun, stabbing into the body of a bandit. Then, it pierced through layers of flesh until it was stuck in the bones. Just now, it unwillingly stopped moving. The immense impact of the arrow didn't even leave the bandit with a chance to cry out in agony. One of the bandits by the side halted his footsteps and looked over in horror. Before the fear in his eyes could dissipate, he felt a sharp pain in his head, and he lost consciousness. The interval between the arrows was actually so short. The bandits' charge came to a halt, and they hurriedly searched for cover. However, before they could even catch their breaths, the strange bloody marks once again appeared on their throats. They were even more accurate and terrifying than the arrows. Someone died at every moment. The morale that had been raised by fear vanished. Only when they returned to their senses did they discover that the third boss had already mounted a pony and galloped off towards the Black Wind stronghold. They immediately scattered. Li Qingshan carried the stone-splitter bow on his back and felt his arms ache slightly. The power of the 3-stone bow really was extraordinary. He had only fired a dozen or so arrows, and he found it rather difficult to continue. He sucked in a deep breath and took another sip of alcohol. "Little Anne, let's chase after them." In the crouching ox village, the villagers were still in a state of panic. Li Long was currently ordering people to collect the corpses. "Along, how did you end up like this?" An old, dignified voice rang out in the darkness. Li Long shuddered. "Master, why have you come?" It was the master of the Iron Fist who had shaken up Qingyang City, the Iron Lion Liu Hong. "I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to subdue those bandits, so I came to take a look." Liu Hong emerged from the darkness. His eyes were like rings, and he radiated dignity even without being angry. He wore large, luxurious robes and seemed awe-inspiring, like a mighty lion. He glanced at the corpses of the bandits. "You've fallen out with the Black Wind stronghold." You didn't do it." "What a heavy blow. Tell me, what happened?" Li Long could only tell him everything in detail. When Liu Hong heard the third boss' actions, he snorted coldly. "How dare he look down on me and the Iron Fist like this? If I were here, I'd definitely kill him myself. I'd like to see whether that blind bear is bold enough to fall out with me or not. When he heard how Li Qingshan had struck out, he praised, "What boldness and skill. How old do you think this Li Qingshan is?" "Roughly 15. Li Long himself was rather surprised, so he could only say it out loud. Only now did he remember that Li Qingshan was only a teenager. What? He's only 15? Liu Hong was shocked. He was a veteran of the Jianghu. Let alone 15-year-old third-rate masters, he had even seen first-rate masters before. However, behind these talented youths were all the shadows of large clans and sects. At the very least, they had a master with unparalleled martial arts. Chapter 39. Li Long pointed in a direction, and Liu Hong strode over. The Iron Fist was not particularly skilled in movement techniques, but he took 7 or 8 steps longer with each step than a regular person. His sleeves fluttered in the wind, and he did not slow down at all. Before long, he arrived where the Black Wind Mountain bandits had stopped and set up a campfire. Only a few corpses remained there now, and a few wolves were currently gnawing on the corpses. They raised their heads and let out threatening howls when they heard the noise. Liu Hong snorted coldly like a clap of thunder. The wolves howled and fled in fright. Liu Hong examined the corpses. This really is the power of the stone splitter bow. Huang Binghu has actually given away his famed weapon. Is he Huang Binghu's disciple? No, with that sickly tiger's martial arts, he can't raise a disciple like that. Though, since he's given the stone splitter bow to him, Huang Binghu probably intends for him to take over as hunting chief. No wonder he's not afraid of the Black Wind stronghold. As long as he returns to the Drawn Rains village, the Black Wind stronghold won't be able to do anything to him. It's not like they can destroy the Drawn Rains village. Does Li Qingshan really want to kill them all? The smell of blood stung his nostrils, and Li Long trembled slightly. He had practiced martial arts for over a decade, so fighting and brawling was nothing out of the ordinary for him. However, with the influence of the Iron Fist in Qingyang City, he did not have a corresponding opponent to fight him to the death. At most, he would teach a lesson to some ignorant hooligan or passerby of the Jianghu. He had never seen so many corpses before. Since we've become sworn enemies, we obviously have to kill them all. It's just too easy in Qingyang City. Originally, with your talent, your skills should have been much greater than this. Liu Hong felt like it was only natural, so he taught a lesson to his disciple. Li Long stammered, unable to reply. Liu Hong continued to examine the corpses. These wounds are so strange. He discovered a bandit who had died from having his throat slit. What's so strange about it? This bandit died in a pile of people. Look at his expression and posture when he died. He doesn't seem to have reacted at all. What's this all about? Afterwards, he discovered many other bandit corpses with the same wounds. Li Long's heart shivered as he imagined the strange sight. He could not help but look around. The dark mountains and forests seemed to be hiding ghosts. Only when he saw Liu Hong did he feel much more at ease. As long as your movement technique is good enough, you can achieve that. However, across the entire Qingyang, only the sect master of the Dragon's Gate sect can rival a movement technique like that. Not only does this Li Qingshan have assistants, but he's very powerful as well. No matter how experienced Liu Hong was in the Jianghu, he couldn't guess that the mountain bandits couldn't react because they couldn't see the enemy. They followed the tracks left on the ground and went deep into the mountains. The corpses of the bandits were as obvious as road signs. Some fell to the ground after being hit by arrows, while others died from having their throats slit. Li Qingshan had grabbed him by the neck. Back then, he had not been very afraid, but now, he actually felt lingering fear. They discovered another bandit's corpse. Li Long said, "The bandits are all dead. Only the third boss remains." Afterwards, they discovered a pony that had collapsed on the ground, foaming at the mouth. Before long, Liu Hong stopped and gazed below a large tree. Even he, an experienced member of the Jianghu, was extremely shocked. The blood had spread very far. The smell of blood was even heavier than around the campfire where most of the bandits had died just now. With just a single glance, Li Long could not help but vomit, as if he wanted to vomit up all the horrors he had seen tonight. For the entire night, the third boss seemed to be submerged in a nightmare that he could not wake up from. The people around him died one by one, while the god of death closed in on him step by step. The third boss circulated his movement technique and desperately fled towards the Black Wind stronghold. Although he was not as fast as the Dragon's Gate sect, perhaps the danger had stimulated his potential, so he was not slow at all. The sinister wind circled around him, chasing him closely. He did not dare to stop at all. Only when he had expended all of his inner chi did he stop. He stopped under a large tree and panted heavily. Looking down the slope, he could already see the traces of the Black Wind stronghold. Just as he smiled, twang, the arrow whistled through the air, piercing through his thigh and nailing deep into the tree trunk. Withered leaves fell like rain. The third boss ignored the intense pain. He looked at the terrifying figure walking out of the forest with a smile on his face. He was like a hunter who had caught his prey that he had been chasing for a long time. The bowstring in his hand was still vibrating. This is the end, third boss. I admit defeat today. The Jianghu is a small place, so why not make friends? In such a dangerous moment, the third boss actually took on the attitude of a hoodlum and began to speak in the Jianghu. However, before he could finish, an arrow pierced through him. Don't mention that word, because you're not worthy. Come, speak. Tell me everything about the Black Wind stronghold. How many people do you have? How many bosses do you have? What martial arts does the first boss practice? If I tell you, will you spare me? The third boss was covered in sweat. He was in pain and fear. Li Qingshan considered it for a moment. No. I already said that you must die today. I'll give you a quick death. He did not even need to lie. He just told the third boss clearly that he wanted to kill him. He could tell him or not. The third boss said, "Fuck you. If you want to kill me, come at me. Let's see if I'll even frown." Li Qingshan smiled coldly. That's exactly what I wanted. A red light that even he did not notice flowed in the depths of his eyes. Li Long forced himself to calm down, but his eyes avoided the corpse under the tree. "Master, should we continue chasing?" Liu Hong waved his hand. "There's no need. With such a star of evil appearing, the Jianghu will be filled with trouble from now on." He had seen many ruthless people in the Jianghu. This third boss was not inferior to them. However, it was rare to see someone so ruthless and merciless as soon as they entered the Jianghu. Who wouldn't want to vomit a few times? Only after experiencing many life and death experiences could one's heart gradually harden. Li Long said, "He's only a third-rate martial artist." He relied on a sneak attack to heavily injure the third boss. "Why does Master care so much about him?" Liu Hong said, "I can only tell you that there are many people like this in the Jianghu. Not a single one of them is weak. Any martial arts in the hands of such people can display extraordinary power. Do not carelessly make an enemy out of them." "Why is that?" Li Long did not understand. Could it be that being vicious and merciless meant that one's martial arts were high? The essence of martial arts lies in killing. However, Li Qingshan, who was regarded as a star of evil by Liu Hong, was currently kneeling by the stream and vomiting. His tears flowed down his face as he vomited. In the end, the third boss bones were not as hard as he had said. He told Li Qingshan everything he wanted to know in full detail. All he wanted was to die. After killing the third boss, the red light in his eyes dimmed. He seemed to have realized what he had done. He had used an incomparably cruel method to torture a living person. But that was not all. What was more frightening was that he felt great pleasure from it. "What's going on with me?" A cow's hoof stepped into the stream. Li Qingshan raised his head. Oxen looked at him and said with a tone that seemed to be praising and mocking, "You're becoming more and more like a demon." Chapter 40. Oxen asked, "Do you still want to continue? Don't blame me for not warning you. You might really end up becoming a demon. As long as I have a clear conscience and can freely express my thoughts, I will have no regrets even if I end up becoming a demon," Li Qingshan said as he stood up. His confused heart was instead strengthened by Oxen's words. Oxen could not help but look at him in a different light. Even a cultivator with a firm will would feel fear and repulsion when they heard that they would fall into the path of demons and become a demon. It had already prepared itself to patiently advise him, but Li Qingshan was not too affected. He was still firm in his choice and did not show any signs of wavering. It was truly rare. However, this was also good. If he was the kind of person who would only care about this kind of thing, it would not be worth Oxen's effort. The age that Li Qingshan lived in his past life was an age of information explosion. As a shut-in, he consumed various movies and novels day and night as mental sustenance. He had come across the most diverse thoughts, as well as witnessed the most terrifying and grand spectacles. Under the impact of all kinds of information, his ability to accept things was probably something few people in this era could compare to. He would not be bound by any traditional way of thinking. This kind of advantage and strength was slowly showing itself, and he displayed a power that no magical ability or artifact could replace. No matter how strong Li Qingshan's cultivation talent was, it was difficult for Oxen to take him seriously. However, his personality was unique and completely different, which was why Oxen placed great importance on him. "Come with me." One ox and one man advanced through the pathless mountains. Oxen did not say where they were going, and Li Qingshan did not ask. After he understood the strength of the Black Wind stronghold from the third boss, he immediately knew that he was no match for them. He could only become stronger. After walking for an unknown period of time, there was suddenly a sound in the forest. As he moved forward, the rumbling sound grew closer and closer, until it was like thunder. The scenery in front of him suddenly became clear. On a cliff that was dozens of feet high, a waterfall flew straight down and fell into the pool like a jade dragon, splashing snowflake-like foam. In the center of the pool, there was a big whirlpool that kept spinning, and there were many smaller whirlpools around it. Li Qingshan stood in front of the waterfall. Even though he had a strong will, he still felt a little shaken in the face of nature's creation. "Brother Nyo, what is this?" "Waterfall. Of course I know it's a waterfall. Why did you bring me here?" "Of course it's cultivation." At this time, a broken piece of wood fell from the top of the waterfall and was instantly sucked into the whirlpool. It crashed into the rocks in the water and broke into pieces. If a person were to be sucked into it, they would definitely die horribly. Li Qingshan gasped. "It's in here." Oxen said, "If you want to cultivate the strength of a bull, this is the fastest shortcut. Whether you want to take it or not, it's all up to you." With that, Li Qingshan leapt into the pool resolutely. In the air, the information he had obtained from the third boss flashed through his head. The Black Wind stronghold had around 300 people, and there were a total of 7 bosses. Of course, there were 6 of them now, and 5 of them were third-rate masters. The first boss was known as the Black Bear, Xiong Xiangwu. He was a true second-rate master, and he could defeat the other bosses if they worked together. Li Qingshan's current martial arts were only at the peak of the third rate. If he did not use sneak attacks, he would probably only be able to deal with 2 bosses working together. If he faced 3, he would definitely lose. He could only flee, let alone face the master of the Black Wind stronghold. He was a colossal figure that he could not defeat right now. The only good news was that once winter came, the mountains would be sealed off by snow. If the Black Wind stronghold wanted to carry out a large-scale operation, they would have to wait until spring at the very least. That was the time he had left. He had to become even stronger. Only then could he stop the Black Wind stronghold, protect the Crouching Ox village, and fulfill his promise. Various thoughts flashed through his head. He saw the water surface grow closer and closer, and the toughness of Li Qingshan's mental fortitude appeared. He immediately suppressed all of his nervousness and fear. His mind was at peace, and he quickly adjusted his position. He sucked in a deep breath and dove into the water. Oxen muttered from the top of the pool, "I even said I'd take it step by step. I'd start meditating under the waterfall." Immediately, it felt a wave of resentment attack it. Little and stared at it fixedly, and Oxen felt slightly uncomfortable. "Brat, don't look at me like that." The rapids slammed against Li Qingshan's body. He was like a small boat in a storm, unable to control himself. He could collide with the rocks at any time and sink. Li Qingshan was quite skilled in the water, but he was unable to unleash it at all right now. He used the ox demon forges its hide, and the pain from the water against his skin vanished. Before he could even catch his breath, a black shadow pressed towards him. The rapids pushed him towards the rocks. The huge log earlier served as an example. Even with the ox demon forges its hide, he would still die from being smashed to pieces. It was far too difficult to fend off the power of nature with the body of a human. The ox demon stamps its hooves. A mouthful of true qi sank into his dantian, and Li Qingshan's body seemed to grow heavier out of nowhere. Suddenly, he plummeted and landed on the tough bottom of the pool. The rocks cracked, leaving behind 2 deep footprints. However, when he reached the bottom of the pool, the direction of the current changed again, pulling him towards the largest whirlpool. He tried his best to stay where he was, fighting against the current. Soon, he used up his breath, and a suffocating feeling gripped him tightly. In this kind of current, it was impossible to swim out of the water. As soon as his feet left the water, he would be sucked into the whirlpool by the current. Soon, he lost his consciousness. Even the deafening roar seemed to be far away. Suddenly, he felt a chill in his chest, and his true qi reacted automatically. When Li Qingshan regained his consciousness, he saw Little and pressing his chest anxiously, and the yin qi triggered the reaction of his true qi. In this moment of life and death, his true qi suddenly circulated faster, rushing into his mouth and nose. The feeling of suffocation vanished, replaced by innate true qi. Li Qingshan had never expected true qi to have such a wondrous use. He nodded at Little and to express his gratitude before gritting his teeth and releasing his feet, allowing the current to suck him into the huge whirlpool. Little and paced around the surroundings of the whirlpool for a while before suddenly making up his mind. He returned to shore and knelt down, bowing to Oxen. Oxen asked, "You want to help him?" Little and nodded violently. Liu Hong and Li Long returned to the crouching ox village and comforted the villagers before returning to Qingyang City. The village seemed to have returned to peace, but the feeling of unease could not be shaken off. The Black Wind stronghold was like a terrifying mountain pressing down on their heads. Many people wanted to flee the village. However, Li Qingshan's promise before he left gave everyone hope. At a critical moment, the prodigy of the village, Li Long, was unable to protect them, and the important figure of the city, Liu Hong, had only arrived afterwards. Only Li Qingshan stood before them all, protecting them all alone. Afterwards, the rumored soldiers appeared and took away the heads of the third boss and several dozen bandits. Qingyang City shook up. There was actually someone bold enough to offend the Black Wind stronghold. Both the righteous and the righteous learnt a name, Li Qingshan. In the government office, the fat district magistrate ordered the advisor, "Quick, report the merit to the prefect." As soon as I arrived in Qingyang City, I annihilated a group of bandits. If anyone still dares to say I'm useless, hang their heads on the city gates and let the people of the city know my power. Also, find that Li Qingshan. I want to thank him in person for saving my life and give him great riches and honor. The advisor said, "Sir, it's only right to report the merit to the prefect, but there's no need to hang their heads. The Black Wind stronghold is not to be trifled with. As for that Li Qingshan, he'll probably die." Yes, in the eyes of many people, Li Qingshan was already a dead man. Although they admired Li Qingshan's viciousness and martial arts, no one believed he was the opponent of the Black Wind stronghold. The Black Bear, Xiong Xiangwu, was a figure who could stop children from crying at night in Qingyang City. He had made a name for himself even before Li Qingshan. The two of them were on completely different levels. Chapter 41. All the advisor could do was agree. The district magistrate's desire for silver had already overwhelmed his fear of the Black Wind stronghold, so he could not persuade him otherwise. And, the Black Wind stronghold probably would not be bold enough to openly kill an official and rebel. The fat district magistrate's aura suddenly vanished. He said softly, "It's not like I killed him. There's no need for the master of the Black Wind stronghold to make trouble for me, right?" The advisor twirled his mustache. "He probably won't, But just in case. Ask your sister for reinforcements and get the prefect to send reinforcements. The fat district magistrate said, yes. He might be the prefect, but he's also my brother-in-law. We're all family. As long as he sends a hawkwolf guard, we won't have to fear anyone. Although he was chubby, his younger sister just happened to be as pretty as a flower. The prefect took a fancy to her and took her in as a concubine, so she was very doted on. His status rose as well, so he begged his sister to give him a pillow talk so that he could get a position. However, the prefect did not like him, so he casually sent him to the remote Qingyang city to become the district magistrate. Not only did it deny him the opportunity to use his connections to intimidate others, but it also kept him away from his sister. It was basically killing two birds with one stone. The advisor thought, how can the hawkwolf guard be sent over so easily? Just finding a decent guard in the prefect's estate will be enough. Then what about Li Qingshan? The fat district magistrate thought about it and said, he's my savior no matter what. When I see him, give him some silver and send him elsewhere. The Clear River Prefecture is so large, so where can't he go? In the Drawn Rains village, Huang Binghu received the news. At first, he was surprised before laughing aloud. Nicely done. Ever since he had ingested the spiritual alcohol, his sickly appearance had vanished. He had become rosy and full of life. Not only had his martial arts recovered, but they had even improved drastically. Hunting chief, won't he be making trouble for the Drawn Rains village by offending the Black Wind stronghold like this? He's carrying your stone splitter bow. You shouldn't have given it to him in the first place, and he's already gone missing. He's probably already fled. Xiao He was dissatisfied. That day at the market, he had eaten Li Qingshan's fist. Although he did not dare to retaliate, he still had some resentment. Originally, he was the leader of the younger generation in the village, but when Li Qingshan came, he was completely overshadowed. Now that he was in the limelight, his heart was filled with jealousy. Huang Binghu said, if the Black Wind stronghold comes knocking on our door, we'll receive whatever methods they have. However, he won't run, much less come to us for protection. I'm just a sick tiger, but he's a true tiger that has descended from the mountains. Therefore, the name Descending the Mountain Tiger became Li Qingshan's first nickname. When the heads of dozens of Black Wind mountain bandits were hung on top of the city walls, Li Qingshan's name spread even further. Large patches of snowflakes floated down from the sky. In the middle of the night, a black shadow scuttled onto the top of the city walls and took down the third boss's head. Then, he urged his horse to gallop back to the Black Wind stronghold, bringing it to the chief of the stronghold, Xiong Xiangwu. Xiong Xiangwu was just like his nickname. Not only was he abnormally tall, his hair was also thick and black. From afar, he looked like a giant bear. With a single glance, it was obvious that this person was born with great strength. He stood up and looked around. Regardless of whether it was the bosses on the two sides or the surrounding bandits, no one dared to make a sound. Boom! His huge, bear-like palm slammed down, and the head, along with the thick rosewood table, was smashed to pieces. This is the fate of the incompetent. This is also the fate of those who dare to provoke me. Pieces of wood shot in all directions. The nearby bandits were all pierced in the face, but no one dared to make a sound or move. The second boss waved his fan and stood up. He was a middle-aged man dressed like a scholar. Even at this time of the year, he still wore a long robe, which showed just how deep his inner strength was. Chief, the third boss was heavily injured by a sneak attack with the stone splitter bow. That's why he couldn't defeat that brat. Stone splitter bow. Huang Binghu. A trace of vigilance appeared in Xiong Xiangwu's eyes. Wasn't he seriously ill? I heard that he's recovered. Xiong Xiangwu's brows furrowed as he muttered to himself. On Bailaro Peak, Yang Jun said, you still haven't found him? Anger twisted his handsome face. He had always been a good-for-nothing, so he didn't have that much patience. Young master, I've heard some news recently. Kai Da said. Drawn Rains Village's Huang Binghu has recovered. What about it? Yang Jun said impatiently. Kai Da secretly cursed him for being an idiot. I heard that his illness is chronic, and only the spirit ginseng can cure it. Yang Jun's eyes lit up. He wanted nothing more than to immediately go to Drawn Rain's village and ask about it. However, he wasn't crazy. With a sullen face, he said, "Go get my father. The spirit ginseng isn't so easily digested. Even if he ate it, he'll have to spit it out." Amidst the clamor, no one noticed that the back of Li Qingshan's house had been dug up. The porcelain jar that contained the white bones had disappeared. Snow fell, and the pond water became even more bone-piercingly cold. It didn't show any signs of freezing. Li Qingshan crawled out of the pond water, his lips turning blue. He laid down on a patch of withered grass and looked at the grey sky above the white waterfall. The breath he exhaled turned into white mist. This kind of cultivation was practically taking one's life, but Li Qingshan insisted on squeezing out all of his true qi before he was willing to climb out of the pond to rest. Only after drinking a mouthful of spirit wine did his body regain its warmth, and his exhausted true qi began to surge again. A beast was being roasted on the bonfire, emitting a thick fragrance. Little Anne was squatting at the side like a professional roasting master. He spun the wooden fork and sprinkled the seasoning he brought from home on top of the meat. He was completely focused. When he saw Li Qingshan coming out, he waved his hunting knife and cut off a large piece of meat. He held it up and brought it to Li Qingshan's mouth. Only when he saw Li Qingshan wolfing down the meat did he reveal a smile. Li Qingshan ate until his mouth was covered with grease. He suddenly asked in surprise, "Aren't you afraid of fire?" Little Anne was afraid of sunlight and also afraid of fire. There were many restrictions on what he could do. It was impossible for him to squat beside the fire so casually. Even though it was a cloudy day today, Little Anne would often hide in the locust wood plate and refuse to come out. Little Anne hesitated and couldn't answer. Li Qingshan smiled and said, "Did you learn some supernatural power from Brother Ox? It's not easy to get something out of it. Why did you hide it from me?" Little Anne hesitated for a while, then he carried out a porcelain jar from the bushes with difficulty. Li Qingshan opened the lid and a bloody smell assaulted his nostrils. There was a small white skeleton inside, dripping with bright red blood. The two colors, red and white, were extremely glaring and bright. They were filled with an evil and bloody feeling. Li Qingshan frowned. "What is this?" Little Anne was like a child who had done something wrong. He lowered his head and didn't say anything. Path of white bone and great beauty. Oxen suddenly appeared and said 5 words. This is also a supernatural power. Yin ghosts don't have a physical body. Although they look free and can avoid the eyes and ears of normal people, when they cultivate, they are naturally handicapped. Furthermore, they are afraid of fire and light. They are restrained by many spells. Chapter 42. Li Qingshan took a deep breath. White bone bodhisattva, it's the devil's path again. Although he didn't know how high a Buddhist monk who was about to become a bodhisattva was, he knew that this was probably a supernatural power that was far beyond his imagination. Li Qingshan said with a serious expression, "I'm afraid this supernatural power isn't easy to cultivate." Oxen said, "Yes, this kind of supernatural power involves the creation of life and death. Not only does it require the cultivator's soul to be extremely talented, it also requires the blood of a living being that is about to die as a sacrifice, enduring the burning of blood and qi to obtain a large amount of qi. But right now, we're only using beast blood to make up the numbers. The best thing to refine is naturally human blood, especially for martial artists with vigorous qi and qi." Li Qingshan's heart trembled. No matter who heard this kind of cultivation method, they could only think of it as an evil method or the devil's path. And no matter what legend or story, those who used human lives to cultivate were all villains, and in the end, they all died horrible deaths. He couldn't help but ask, "Why do you want to cultivate this?" Little Anne was so scared that his face turned pale. His spiritual wisdom was gradually awakened. He also knew that this was an extremely evil devil's path. Oxen said, "Of course, to help you. Heh, could it be that this is the upper level of ghost-controlling heart sutra?" Li Qingshan's whole body trembled. No longer able to say any words of reproach, he lowered his head and could only smile bitterly. "Looks like we've all followed the wrong master. We're destined to walk on this devil's path until the end." Only then did Little Anne calm down. He smiled shyly. A seeker deer dashed through the forest, trying to avoid the chilly wind that followed it like a shadow. But in the end, its throat was slit by a hunting knife. Before the blood splattered to the ground, it was caught by a porcelain jar. As soon as the hot blood fell into the jar, the chilly wind rolled up a blood-drenched skeleton and sent it flying. White Bones sat cross-legged, like an old monk meditating. There was a mysterious feeling of a mixture of holiness and evil. If there was an eminent monk here, he might be able to comprehend the essence of Buddhism and Taoism, the cycle of life and death. Li Qingshan could only watch on as Little and attached himself to the white bone and refined the blood energy. The blood energy rose up like blossoms of blood flames. Little and frowned. His soul trembled as he withstood a great deal of pain. Most of the demonic path's divine arts took shortcuts, but shortcuts were also dangerous. One had to pay an enormous price and take an enormous risk. The pain of having one's soul burned by blood energy was even worse than having one's body burned by fire. One had to rely on great willpower to maintain their sanity. Cultivating supernatural powers wasn't something that an ordinary person could do. Li Qingshan clenched his fists tightly. He felt as if there was a ball of fire burning in his heart, an unbearable heat. The pain that Little An had suffered at Witch's side was probably not even 1/100th of what he was experiencing now. He reached out to stop her. Oxen said, "This isn't just for you. You have something you want to do, a wish you want to fulfill." He is the same. This is his freedom. His wish. Yes, his wish is to help you. Oxen couldn't help but laugh at his own witty words. But as he saw that Li Qingshan wasn't smiling, he restrained his smile. "Did you know? When I agreed to this little demon, he was so happy. And now he is also very happy. As long as he can fulfill my wishes, he will have no regrets no matter what he does. Didn't you say that yourself?" After a long time, the blood energy was completely refined and fused into the white bone. A faint layer of dark red appeared on the white bone. Li Qingshan took out the spirit ginseng and a drop of ginseng liquid. He placed it between Little An's eyebrows. Little An closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Li Qingshan turned around and jumped into the cold pond once again. Only by doing so could he calm his heart. The days passed quickly. The 10,000 mountains were covered in snow. Li Qingshan went into the water every day to cultivate. Almost every day, he would get a body full of injuries before coming back up. If it weren't for his extraordinary physique and the constant nourishment from the spirit wine, his body would have collapsed long ago. Little An constantly hunted wild beasts. At first, he only used the blood of small herbivores like hares and gazelles to cultivate. Later on, he used the blood of carnivores like tigers and leopards that were full of blood energy and killing intent to cultivate. The two of them seemed to be in a competition. They practiced with all their might. The taste of the spirit wine made from the spirit ginseng also became fainter and fainter. Until a month later, the waterfall was still roaring and the whirlpool in the pond was still spinning. In the center of the whirlpool, one could vaguely see the figure of a person dancing in the water. Against the boundless torrent, as if facing countless enemies, Li Qingshan used the ox demon's fist of great strength in the water. Every move and form was the same as when he was on land. He didn't lose his form at all, but instead was filled with a heavy strength. The ox demon tramples its hooves stabilized his body. The ox demon forges its hide blocked the torrent, and the ox demon butts its horns attacked the whirlpool. His true chi also spun like the whirlpool, forming a small cyclone. The true chi flowed to his limbs and bones at an increasing speed. The pond water surged, 10 times more turbulent than usual. Li Qingshan punched out. Boom! Like thunder exploding in the water, a terrifying aura came from the water, startling countless birds and beasts. Little An's heart skipped a beat. It was as if some terrifying beast had been released, far more powerful than wolves, tigers, and leopards. He stared at the surface of the water. The water had calmed down, and the spinning whirlpool had actually disappeared. A smile appeared in the green ox's eyes. A tall figure jumped out of the deep pond and landed on the rock. Li Qingshan's bronze-colored body was as sturdy as an ox, as if he was carved out of rock. Every muscle was filled with explosive power. His fist smashed on the rock beneath his feet. Boom. It didn't sound like flesh hitting the rock, but more like a rock hitting another. After a moment of silence, catcher, the huge rock that had been polished by the pond water for countless years cracked, and finally shattered. Before the rock shattered, Li Qingshan had already jumped to the edge of the pond. Looking at his hands, he muttered, "This is the strength of an ox." He felt as if there was endless power in his body. His entire body seemed to have been reborn. If he met a third-rate expert like the third boss again, he would only need one hand to crush him to death, and he wouldn't be able to harm a single hair on his body. Oxen said, "You've finally learned the basics." Li Qingshan picked up the stone splitter bow and drew it like a crescent moon. The originally tough metal bow was now as soft as a regular wooden bow. Twang, twang, twang. Li Qingshan plucked the bowstring again and again. He had actually used the rapid arrow technique with a 3-pickle bow. With this series of shots, the bowstring boomed. The sound of it vibrating seemed to cut through the air. Li Qingshan felt like he still had power to spare, so he did not stop. With a great roar, he shot up, down, left, right, and in all directions. Power, endless power. It was as if as long as he wanted it, he could do anything and defeat all enemies. Now this was the feeling of a supernatural ability. It did not belong to any martial arts of the mortal world. Little Anne watched on from one side. He was filled with endless admiration. "Little Anne, it's time to leave the mountain." Li Qingshan picked up the porcelain jar and made his way out of the mountain. He did not go to the Black Wind stronghold, but to Qingyang City. The sound of the waterfall faded away, and the water surged again. The whirlpool spun again. Chapter 43. Li Qingshan did not return to the Crouching Ox village. At the very least, the small village was still safe and sound right now. He did not go to the Drawn Reins village either. He did not want to bring his troubles to others, nor did he directly attack the Black Wind stronghold. He had already fallen out with the Black Wind stronghold, and once spring arrived, the Black Wind mountain bandits would probably move out and massacre the small village that had raised him. He sneered inside. "You treat me as an enemy, so why wouldn't I treat you as an enemy? I will definitely kill my way into the Black Wind stronghold and take the head of the famed master of the Black Wind stronghold. Only then will I feel at ease after I make him guilty of all his crimes and die a horrible death." Why did he train so hard? It was to kill all of his enemies. However, before that, he needed to make some preparations. He did not even have a suitable weapon on hand. He would be at too much of a disadvantage if he were bare-handed. Even a lion would use its full strength to catch a rabbit, not to mention the fact that the 200 bandits of the Black Wind stronghold were not 200 rabbits. Every single one of them had taken lives on their hands. They were extremely vicious. Once he charged in, it would no longer be a fight of the Jianghu. Instead, it would be a fight on the battlefield. If he were still careless, then there would be something wrong with his head. The arsenal of arms in Qingyang City was an extremely renowned weapons store. He planned on checking it out, but he had to spend money to buy weapons. Not only was he penniless right now, but he did not even have any decent clothes on him. His clothes were tattered, baring his chest, which attracted the attention of passers-by. Was he not afraid of freezing to death dressed like this in weather like this? Li Qingshan cultivated in the icy pool every day, so how could he be afraid of this little bit of coldness? But no one treated him like a beggar, because his face didn't have the self-abased and wretched look of a penniless person. Instead, it was brimming with strong self-confidence, as if no matter what difficulties he encountered, he could use his hands to solve them. As he strolled around, he admired the city that was filled with a classical style. He did not go out of his way to hide the fact that he was a country bumpkin. A carriage suddenly sped over. The driver waved his whip and yelled, "Piss off! Piss off!" He watched as the passers-by dodged in a mess and laughed complacently. Everyone felt indignant as they watched the carriage drive off into the distance, but no one dared to say anything. This was a great aristocrat of Qingyang City. Let alone chasing away pedestrians, even if the carriage of the Zhong estate killed someone, they would just have to pay compensation at most. The coachman suddenly saw a ragged silhouette in front of him, as if he could not hear his voice and did not know how to dodge. He cursed loudly, "Stinky beggar, get lost." He did not pull the reins and let the carriage crash into him. The pedestrians also called out to be careful. Just as the carriage was about to collide with the beggar dodged sideways and dodged by a hair's breadth. Before the coachman could react, the carriage came to an abrupt stop and he flew out like a cloud. Things were rolling around in the carriage, and a woman's screams could be heard. The two horses pulling the carriage raised their hooves and neighed loudly, but the carriage seemed to be enchanted. It was fixed in place, squeaking but unable to move a single step forward. The coachman stood up with a carp flip. He was actually quite good at this. Just when he was about to curse aloud, he saw the passers-by staring at the back of the carriage dumbfounded. Li Qingshan grabbed the frame of the carriage with one hand as his feet were planted deeply into the ground, but he did not move at all. He did not move, so the carriage obviously could not move either. The coachman gulped. What kind of power was this? A young man in embroidered clothes reeking of alcohol leapt out of the carriage. "Lai Fu, what the hell are you doing?" However, Lai Fu pointed at Li Qingshan and cursed, "Stinky beggar, stay away from my carriage. If you touch me, I'll chop off your hand." He was drunk, so he did not notice that Li Qingshan was currently grabbing his carriage. "I'm not a beggar. I'm Li Qingshan." Li Qingshan stated his name. He wanted to teach this wastrel and this arrogant servant a lesson. "What, Li Qingshan?" The young man's eyes were dazed and filled with disdain. Towards the end, his tone suddenly changed, as if someone had grabbed him by the neck. He sobered up too. "Which Li Qingshan is it?" Li Qingshan said in confusion, "You recognize me." The coachman wailed, "Young master, it's the descended tiger." His face that was originally flushed red suddenly paled. "Descended tiger? What's that?" Just as Li Qingshan frowned, the young master knelt down with a thump. No, it's this lowly one who has offended you. Please spare me, young hero." Afterwards, he removed the money pouch from his waist and offered it up with both hands. "Treat this money as my apology to the young hero." The bystanders had never seen the young master of the Zhong family behave in such a subservient manner. They all raised their eyebrows, but when they heard the words "descended tiger," their gazes towards Li Qingshan immediately changed. There was admiration mixed with fear. Li Qingshan weighed the money pouch in his hand. There really was quite a lot of money inside. It was enough for him to buy a set of decent clothes, eat a full meal in the best restaurant, and have a good night's sleep in an inn. But how strange. "It's not like I plan on killing you. At most, I'll just give you a few light punches. I don't even dare to use force, so why are you so scared?" He could instinctively sense that the reason why the young master was so scared of him was not because of his skill in stopping the horse. However, when he saw how the young master was scared to the point of wetting his pants, he lost all interest in teaching him a lesson. He picked up the money pouch and walked away. Only when he saw Li Qingshan walk away did the young master climb up from the ground as his legs weakened. He glanced at the end of the street in fear. Li Qingshan was actually right in front of him. That was a terrifying figure who had killed several dozen people. No matter how arrogant and despotic he was not bold enough to act up before a person like that. His face reddened from the mockery of the pedestrians. When he turned around and saw the carriage driver hiding to one side, he became even more furious. He went up and kicked him wildly. You're still trying to hide. That's what I told you to hide. That's what I told you to not drive properly." Although the carriage driver was skilled in martial arts, he did not even try to dodge. All he did was beg for forgiveness softly. Li Qingshan held the money pouch and felt even more at ease inside. Although the money had come rather mysteriously, he suddenly remembered that the matter at hand was to investigate some information and understand the changes in the Black Wind stronghold. He just happened to have a fellow villager who lived in Qingyang City. He was also a person of the Jianghu. He asked a few people and arrived before the Iron Fist. At the entrance stood two towering, bald men with arms as thick as a regular person's thighs. They glanced past the passers-by with shining eyes. Before the passers-by could even approach the entrance, they would move far away and pass by on the other side of the street, which demonstrated the might of the iron fist. Seeing a beggar in ragged clothes walk up to the entrance, the man said rudely, "Piss off. This isn't a place for you to beg." The other man stopped his companion and studied Li Qingshan up and down. He mocked, "Kid, you seem like someone who knows how to talk. How did you end up like this?" He could tell that Li Qingshan's body was sturdy and unafraid of the cold. Li Qingshan said, "I'm looking for someone. Please pass on a message. He's called Li Long, tell him that I'm from the same hometown as him. I'm called Li Qingshan." The two men were originally unconcerned. Only when they heard the two words Li Long did they become cautious. He was the beloved disciple of the sect master. When they heard the two words Li Qingshan, their faces changed drastically. The descended tiger, Li Qingshan. Only then did Li Qingshan understand that the descended tiger referred to him. He grumbled inside, "What kind of stupid nickname is that?" The people of the Jianghu were uncultured, but he did not want to be associated with wolves, tigers, and leopards. Chapter 44. Little, hunting chief, your body. My body has recovered. Have the people of the Black Wind Stronghold and the Dragon's Gate sect left? They still refuse to leave. They insist on seeing the Stronghold Master. Just say I'm heavily ill, so it's inconvenient for me to see him. If anyone dares to barge in, don't hold back. Shoot them dead. Huang Binghu placed his hands on the stove. How bold of you, hunting chief Huang. You want to shoot even my people dead? A voice suddenly rang out from outside. The door shattered, and a fierce gust of wind swept in. A refined, middle-aged man with a sword hanging from his waist stood at the entrance. However, his gaze was as sharp as a sword, flickering with light. He was not as gentle as he seemed on the surface. Huang Binghu dared not tarry either. He leapt up and clasped his fist. Sect Master Yang, long time no see. Within a radius of 50 kilometers, there was only a single person who could be referred to as a sect master. He was the sect master of the Dragon's Gate sect, Yang Anji. His Dragon's Gate sword style was renowned, and his movement technique was wondrous. In terms of martial arts alone, he could be regarded as the greatest in Qingyang. If the descendants of the nearby large sects and clans wanted to practice martial arts, they would all be sent to the Dragon's Gate sect. When the descendants of these aristocrats gathered together, it was inevitable for them to be arrogant and despotic, but at the same time, they were an extremely great organization. Speaking of which, even the orthodox organizations of Qingyang, Yang Anji studied Huang Binghu. You really have recovered. No wonder even the elders of my sect refuse to see you. I'll cut to the chase. Where's the spiritual ginseng? Yang Anji said, I've never seen any spiritual ginseng before. Does Sect Master Yang want to take advantage of my drawn reins village because there's no one here? Several dozen hunting bows pointed at Yang Anji. The hunters in the village had already reacted. Yang Anji said, if you have another stone splitter bow, you might be able to make me stay. Why don't you try, hunting chief Huang? Huang Binghu squinted his eyes. What are you trying to say? Yang Anji said, Stronghold Master Xiong is right outside. Your stone splitter bow killed his third boss. Do you want to provoke us as well? Huang Binghu sneered loudly. The mighty leader of the righteous path of Qingyang is actually working together with the most vicious bandit leader. Do you really not care about your dignity at all? That's right, I forgot. There's no difference between the two of you. You're all bullying the weak and the kind. In fact, Sect Master Yang is better at making money. Anger flashed across Yang Anji's face, and he placed his hand on the hilt of his sword. However, the sounds of bowstrings being pulled taut around him made him stop. He coldly threatened, hunting chief Huang may not be afraid, but if a battle really breaks out, I want to see how many people in this manner will survive. Huang Binghu said, I've already eaten the spirit ginseng. Sect Master Yang, even if you say anything more ruthless, you can't take it back. Yang Anji said, the spiritual ginseng really is in your hands. Don't try to trick me. The spiritual ginseng is not something that can be digested in a day, nor can it be kept for yourself. You've already used it for so long. If you hand it over now, I might help you fend off the Black Wind stronghold for your sake. Huang Binghu said, I said I ate it, so I ate it. If Hunting Chief doesn't believe me, feel free to snatch it. The bowstrings were fully drawn and the swords were unsheathed. A great battle was about to begin. At the side, Xiao Hei suddenly said, We've never seen any spirit ginseng before. Our Hunting Chief's illness was cured because he drank the wine that Li Qingshan gave him. If you want to find someone, go find him. Yang Anji's eyes lit up. Huang Binghu flew into a rage and shouted, Shut up. Xiao Hei hardened his tone and said, Hunting Chief, he's just an outsider. He gave you the spirit wine and took the stone splitter bow. We don't owe them anything, so why risk our lives to protect him? I'm just thinking for the manner. Yang Anji smiled and said, So that's how it is. I've wronged Brother Huang. No wonder that brat's martial arts improved by leaps and bounds. I'll take my leave now. He used his Qinggong and floated away. If Li Qingshan was here, he would know that this person's Qinggong was 10 times better than his son Yang Jun and his group of disciples. The hunters did not dare to shoot without orders. Yang Anji said from afar, Hunting Chief Huang is indeed good at managing his subordinates. The disciples of the manor always consider the bigger picture. Huang Binghu's expression became even more unsightly. The leader of any faction had to have absolute authority. As long as he made a decision, regardless of whether it was right or wrong, his subordinates would not easily disobey. Li Qingshan saved my life before. He gave me the spirit wine despite the risk. He trusted me. Otherwise, no one would know that he had the spirit ginseng. You're setting me up for injustice. Xiao Hei knelt down and said, Xiao Hei is willing to accept death. The group of hunters gathered around and advised, Hunting Chief, Xiao Hei is doing this for the sake of the manor. So many days have passed, and Qingshan has already escaped to who knows where. There's no need for us to resist. Li Qingshan looked at the large man who scrambled off to report the situation before looking at the trembling man at the entrance. He asked in confusion, Am I that scary? The man left behind could only blame himself for being too slow, allowing his companion to beat him to it. As for whether he was scary or not, he dared not answer the question. All he knew was that the young man before him had personally killed several dozen mountain bandits. He had even obtained inside information that he had tortured and killed the famous third boss of the Black Wind stronghold in Qingyang to death. If a person like that was not scary, what was scary? One was a ferocious-looking man of the Jianghu in his 30s. Any regular person would feel fear when they saw him, while the other was a 15-year-old boy who still had not shed his childishness. He did not seem ferocious at all. However, when the former saw the latter, it was like a mouse seeing a cat. It was rather strange. Li Qingshan suddenly understood that his reputation had already been established. Although it had started with the rather unpleasant nickname of Descended Tiger, it was enough to deter thieves and robbers. A while later, Li Long came out to receive him. When he saw Li Qingshan, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He was afraid to make eye contact with him. He thought of the bloody scene he had seen in the mountains a few days ago, and an unsuppressible fear rose up in his heart. He smiled unnaturally and said, It's Qingshan. Our sect master invites you. Li Qingshan followed him in and made his way around the screen wall with the word martial written on it. He passed through the courtyard and arrived in the training grounds. All he saw were 2 rows of bare-chested men, welcoming him. However, their expressions were unfriendly. The sect master of the Iron Fist, Liu Hong, sat boldly on the armchair and said sternly, You're the Descended Tiger, Li Qingshan? Li Qingshan frowned. Both because of this display of might and because of his nickname of the Descended Tiger, if someone told him right now that he could get a better nickname as long as he killed someone, he would definitely charge over and finish them off without the slightest hesitation. The sect master is asking you a question, the man closest to Liu Hong called out loudly. His muscles bulged and were covered in tattoos. His temples bulged slightly, clearly a master of both internal and external martial arts. Li Qingshan estimated that this person's strength surpassed the third boss. No wonder he was bold enough to speak to him like that. The Iron Fist was able to reign supreme in Qingyang City, so they definitely had something up their sleeves. Li Long said in a hurry, "Please calm down, first senior brother. Qingshan is from the village. He's inexperienced." Then he tugged on Li Qingshan's sleeve. "Why don't you greet my master?" Li Qingshan clasped his hands casually. "Greetings, old hero Liu." However, he did not show much respect. Liu Hong frowned, and the disciples of the Iron Fist on both sides became furious. Li Long blamed him for being insensible. "You've already offended the Black Wind stronghold. Only by asking Master to make a decision and then getting Huang Binghu of the Drawn Rains village to step forward can you settle this. Master is a mighty second-rate master. Isn't he worth a bow from you? This is our first senior brother. People in the Jianghu call him." Li Qingshan waved his hand and interrupted him. "There's no need to remember the name of a small fry. He was not an impolite person, but someone had been impolite to him first, so he definitely would not be polite." Chapter 45. Eldest Senior Brother, Please Don't Be Angry. Li Long tried to stop Eldest Senior Brother, but Eldest Senior Brother grabbed his shoulder and threw him aside like he was grabbing a chicken. Then, Eldest Senior Brother punched Li Qingshan. "Wang Lei, stop!" Liu Hong shouted. Eldest Senior Brother's fist stopped firmly in front of Li Qingshan's face. He shouted, "Master, let me teach this arrogant brat a lesson." Li Qingshan was annoyed. "I wanted to ask you something, but since you're so busy, I'll take my leave first. If you have something to say, just say it. What's the point of pretending? Brat, you're going to die soon." As expected, Li Qingshan stopped. "Oh, what do you mean?" Liu Hong said, "The Black Wind stronghold is looking for you everywhere. It's fine if you hide, but if you dare to show your face in public, you'll definitely die." Li Qingshan said, "Then, according to the normal development, I'll ask you how I can escape this disaster. As long as you agree to join Iron Fist, I have a way to save your life." This was Liu Hong's goal. Iron Fist was a gang, not a sect. It didn't require the members to be disciples. The talent and strength that Li Qingshan showed at such a young age was enough to move anyone in Jianghu. However, as a veteran of the Jianghu who had made a name for himself a long time ago, Liu Hong obviously would not beg Li Qingshan to join him. Perhaps he would try to take him down a notch first, cutting down Li Qingshan's reputation a little so that he would understand the immensity of the world. Then, he would try to persuade him with kind words so that he could understand the bright future of joining the Iron Fist School. But Li Qingshan's rudeness had angered him. "But now, I've changed my mind. Do you really think that after killing dozens of bandits and a leader of the Black Wind stronghold, you're someone important?" Li Qingshan said, "That's great. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first." "Stop right there." Liu Hong finally moved. When he didn't move, it was fine, but when he moved, he was like a furious lion roaring. With one step, he landed in front of Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan had goosebumps all over his body. It was as if he was being stared at by a ferocious beast. He instinctively became vigilant. He chuckled and said, "You are a Jianghu man after all. If you can't win with words, you will try with force. Take this old man's fist." Although Liu Hong originally wanted to recruit Li Qingshan and didn't want to be enemies with him, it was impossible for him not to teach a lesson to a junior who dared to be so rude to him. Perhaps he thought that the leader of the Black Wind stronghold, Xiong Xiangwu, was on the same level as the third leader, which was why he dared to be so arrogant. If that was the case, he would have to show him the absolute difference between a second-rate expert and a third-rate expert. "Wait. What, are you afraid?" Liu Hong asked in a deep voice. "Master is mighty." Eldest senior brother Wang Lei raised his fist and shouted. He looked at Li Qingshan with a mocking expression. The other disciples followed suit and shouted, "Faction leader is mighty." Li Qingshan said, "I once let Li Long hit me 3 times first." Liu Hong narrowed his eyes and revealed a dangerous killing intent. "That was because my disciples' martial arts were weak." "What, you also want to let me hit you 3 times first?" "No." Before Liu Hong's expression softened, Li Qingshan continued, "Seeing that you are an old man, I want to let you hit me 10 times first." Great humiliation. These were the only words in Liu Hong's mind. At that moment, he really wanted to kill Li Qingshan. Then come. Wait. What do you want now? Old hero Liu, you are also a well-known figure in the pugilistic world. I can't let you hit me for nothing. Li Qingshan thought for a while. 1 punch for 10 taels of silver. That's not expensive, right? I have no enmity with you. If I fight with you, even if I win, I won't get a single copper coin. Instead, I will make an enemy out of nowhere. Coincidentally, I don't have money to buy weapons, so I have to find a way to earn some. After thinking about it, only this divine power counts as a skill. This sentence completely angered Liu Hong. It was as if he was mixed up with a juggler. He was so angry that he laughed. Fine, fine, fine. I'm afraid you won't have the life to spend it. Li Long hurriedly went forward to stop him. He had seen with his own eyes that Liu Hong used his iron fists to split stones. If he hit a person, wouldn't that person be smashed into meat paste? Mars. But it was too late. Bang, 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 bang. The shadows of the fists were like galloping horses, fast and heavy. In an instant, 5 punches landed on Li Qingshan's body. Before Li Long could say the word fu, the biting cold wind from the fists blew so hard that the people nearby could not open their eyes, let alone go forward. The momentum of the fists came and went quickly. While everyone was still immersed in the power of the 5 punches, Liu Hong was already standing with his hands down. He sighed softly. Sigh, I broke my vow to kill again today. Li Long was dumbfounded. He couldn't even say the words mercy. Eldest senior brother Wang Lei was the first to react. He shouted, Master is mighty. 50 taels of silver. Li Qingshan suddenly opened his mouth. Liu Hong's eyes widened. However, he heard Li Qingshan praise him. What a heavy punch. I almost couldn't take it. His complexion remained the same. He did not seem like he could not take it at all. Instead, he seemed like an unscrupulous merchant, tricking customers into buying more and making more money. That was indeed the case. After cultivating the strength of an ox, the ox demon Forge's its hide had undergone an earth-shattering change. The original ox demon Forge's its hide gave people the feeling that it was just a powerful external martial art. Now, it could be considered to have the true power of the supernatural power. A tough membrane formed between his skin and flesh. When the heavy punch that could shatter rocks landed on him, it felt like it had landed on rubber. All of the force was nullified, and the dense inner force in the fist was dissolved by true qi as soon as it entered his body. The punches of second-rate masters could no longer harm him. With ease, he had earned 50 taels of silver in a second. Even robbing the rich to help the poor was not that quick. And, unless he had no other choice, he did not want to do something as shady as climbing over walls. Though, does this count as a business of flesh? Before he could think too much about it, the Iron Lion bellowed out and lunged over. Just how many years had it been? Ever since he returned to Qingyang City to retire, he had never been so humiliated, and he had done it before so many disciples. The heavy punches were like a storm, swallowing up Li Qingshan. 80 taels, 90 taels, 100 taels. You still want to fight? 300 taels. 500 taels. Li Qingshan's voice rang out clearly from the storm, constantly stimulating Liu Hong's nerves. The disciples had already become dumbfounded from this. In the beginning, Liu Hong had been full of vigor, but he was old after all. His stamina was waning, so before long, he began to pant and sweat like rain. Li Qingshan could not bear to watch this. He wanted to say, Sir, you can't get through my defenses. However, when he thought of his money-making plan, he could only hold back his benevolence and allow him to continue beating him up. Just the 2 words iron fist were enough to completely overwhelm Li Qingshan. This was not to say that fists were completely inferior to weapons. As a matter of fact, to masters of martial arts like him, fists were even easier to unleash their inner force, shattering the enemy's organs in a single stroke. It also possessed the effect of shaking up the enemy. As long as he gained the upper hand in close combat, it would be extremely easy for him to kill his opponent. However, He just happened to run into a freak like Li Qingshan. Liu Hong did not lose because his skill was inferior, but because he practiced martial arts, while his opponent practiced supernatural abilities. Liu Hong breathed heavily as he punched Li Qingshan's chest powerlessly. Li Qingshan said, "That should be enough." He glanced at Li Long. "You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.